Right. Good morning, everybody, from wonderful Vodafone on a beautiful German winter day. What do you call this? Fall day? This is beautiful rain day. We are here in a room full of folks, so thank you to Martin and his team for hosting us. And we'll get started. Can somebody on the line let us know if you can hear us? Just kind of raise your hand or do a question and tell us you can hear us in the chat.
Can you hear us?
Yep, somebody said, yes, they can hear us, Chris Korzer. So thank you, Chris. All right.
Can't see the slides.
You should be able to. So
okay, we can see the slides in the room?
Yes.
All right.
And you can see them online? I can see his PC, so we're set. It's all yours, Mr. Graham.
All right, thanks everyone for attending our first global RAR User Group meeting that we've held in Germany. I want to thank Martin from Vodafone for hosting. Thank you so much, Martin. Everyone else for attending. Also want to thank Mike for flying into the U.S., Martin and Gerald from driving up from Waldorf this morning. Sorry, just a little noise in the room, no worries. So, and thanks everyone for joining online. So we'll get started here shortly. We're going to just go through a slide for a minute, just covering the agenda and the mission of the user group. So we go to the next slide. Everyone knows about RAR, right? Revenue accounting is, whole idea of our product is to automate and simplify revenue accounting, and we will talk in detail about that. Vodafone shortly will give us their presentation about how they've rolled out RAR over the last couple of years, and we'll also then have some other presentations that we'll go through around a roundtable on migrations, as well as Mike will give a presentation on the portfolio. But let's go through the detailed agenda. And thanks to the community. Again, it's great to have so many community members that are interested. Again, we have over 800 users around the world, and it's growing. We will be changing the registration process shortly, so this link actually is changing. So for the next meeting, we'll have a different set of link for the global user group meeting. The registrations for the meeting, that process will stay the same. I also want to thank Adobe for volunteering to hold the next meeting in Silicon Valley in late January or early February. So we'll have those details hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Go to the next slide. We can cover the agenda. Again, we've gone through some introductions. We'll complete that here in a minute. Then we'll switch to the product team. Volkmar, Gerald, and Martin will give their updates on RAR, both for RAR 1.3 as well as S/4HANA 1909. We'll then have Martin and his team talk about the customer experience that they had rolling out RAR here at Vodafone. Then we'll have lunch brought in, so we'll have a little bit of a break here online as we get the food. But then we'll quickly move into the migration roundtable discussion. So we have a lot of experts here. We've got Hanno from Waldorf Consulting. We've got Jacek from Bramisol. We have Mike from SAP, and also the product team from SAP. We'll go through that discussion. Should be very interesting, get their insights on how customers can move to S4 or other strategies for moving to S4. And then the final official topic on the agenda will be the portfolio topic. So there's been a lot of discussion, especially in the telco industry, about portfolios and how to manage those. And so Mike has been thinking about this quite a bit, and he'll give us his point of view on this topic. So anyway, we're looking forward to that. And then we'll have some time for open discussion. We'll also have a little bit of time for networking for the people in the room. So again, Adobe will be hosting the next meeting. So we thank them for making that offer in late January, February. We hope in a couple of weeks to set the date, announce it. And I'll go back to John to see if we want to do some more introductions here in the room. I have a few people just joining us. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's raining here, so the logistics on transportation were a little challenging over the last couple hours.
Why don't, instead of introducing the SAP or Bramisol Waldorf team, which we'll do later, why don't we just go around and introduce a couple of the customers who are here so folks know who's here? Martin, since you're hosting.
So, so my name is Martijn van Dijk. I'm trying to pronounce it slowly.
Martijn. Okay.
Martijn van Dijk, yes.
Okay.
I'm not yet picky on how you pronounce my name, so no worries. No worries there. I've been working with Vodafone for over 18 years, and last week got the chance to implement SAP RAR for Vodafone. 3 years. Yeah, my name is Christoph Olszewski, working for Vodafone since 2005, means almost 15 years now. Usually I'm not, I'm an SAP basis administrator. This was my education at the former time, but more or less I'm more now working in the Hyperion world, which is Oracle based, but I got a new challenge now since half a year to stabilize IFRS 15 service, as we had a huge challenge there and problems, which we also present later. And since then, I'm now dedicated and working with colleagues over in India and part time to stabilize the whole service.
I'm John Swanchin. I've been with Vodafone now for over 2 years. I joined Vodafone from Hotif, which is based in the States as well. I'm part of the S15 team. I moved from the UK financial accounting into the IS side to join with the S15 stabilization.
What, Hanno? Go ahead.
Well, hello everybody. My name is Hanno Hossmann. I'm from Waldorf Consulting. I'm with the SAP RAR endeavor since a couple of years, even implementing it SAP when I met most of the people here at the table, which is kind of funny because that's now almost 5 years ago. And good to see that still everybody's here. And happy to see a lot of the presentations and interesting discussions.
Next.
Hi, my name is Mark Thüringer. I'm from Supporters, also RAR consultant. Implemented at SAP, the RAR project, and other.
Agnes?
Go ahead.
Yes, so I'm Agnes, I'm from Vodafone. I've been with Vodafone for 9 years now. I've been part of the implementation of that all along. Currently, I'm the global project director.
Okay.
Yeah, my name is Kai Hein. I'm part of the Deloitte consulting team. I have been with SAP actually until last year. I have been part also of the Vodafone project, and now I'm the responsible project lead for the Siemens Healthineers project, where we also now implemented RAR.
My name is Kai Lansburg. I was joining Vodafone from this year, June, and before that I was working in SAP IR for 7 years.
And we have one more colleague, Shramik,
On the phone?
you quickly want to introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, so myself Shramik, I'm working in Vodafone for 10 years and part of this S15 project from past 1.5 years, working with Martin and Agnes.
So he's in Ahmedabad, India.
Ahmedabad. All right.
Okay, well, I think we're ready for the first session, right?
Okay. So who's first? I need to turn it over. Do you guys have slides?
Yeah.
So turn it over to Geralt.
Right, if you make me presenter.
I would be happy to do that, Geralt.
You send me the link.
Yeah, no.
You
are a presenter.
Thank you very much, John, for giving me the opportunity to present now the latest update on RAR from the development point of view. Actually, we had 2 sessions now because we are organized in a way that the team with Volkmar and myself is looking at the new development things, while the current responsibility is within another organization, and Martin later on will show news related to those developments and updates.
Time out. They can't hear you. So you might have to move down here. Gerald, can you move down here actually? Yes, you are now.
You've earned the seat of honor.
Perfect.
Okay, Okay. Better now. Can you hear me now?
We can, but
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yes, they can hear much better.
All right.
Okay, so let me then start again. Thank you very much for hosting that meeting and giving us the opportunity to show the latest developments in revenue accounting. We will have 2 sessions, so I will guide through the latest news for the core development, and we have also an organization which is taking care about existing customers, and this is an area where Martin later on gives us further insights. So I have a little disclaimer here because I'm also touching things and developments which are not out there. So I just make you aware that you should not do any expectations based on those presentations, but I always mention that explicitly once I come up to those areas. So first, I'd like to maybe quickly have a short overview about our solution. On the left-hand side, you see our on-premise solution and offering, and clearly here revenue accounting is offered here as a solution for managing revenues, and that includes also the private cloud or also the HEC offering or single tenant edition. On the cloud, on the other hand, in that area, we sort of are oriented according to business processes. And so basically the underlying solution is not so much of relevance. If you like to know, you know maybe the name event-based revenue recognition, and that is the solution which is sort of covering those processes in the multi-tenant edition. We have also one scenario where we like to be more flexible, connecting especially to external customers, non-SAP customers, and we have here with the SAP platform, the cloud platform here, a specific area where we can also act quite agile, and on that platform we offer another solution which you might know from the Calidus area as RevSim, which we currently call Sap Revenue Recognition. Then just a highlight from the recent development. You might know us being an add-on on the ECC solutions, and with 1809 we have now become an integral part of the S/4HANA stack. So there is no need to install anything as an add-on. You are just getting the solution once you have S/4HANA, and we have also synchronized that also with the corresponding feature packs. So you see here that even with 1809, that is synchronized with the feature pack 6 of RAR 1.3, and 1809 this is synchronized with feature pack 7, 1809. The efforts going from the add-on to the embedded solution should be minimal. Yeah, it's rather small technical things. Otherwise, so if you are included in the ordinary extension framework, it should be an easy upgrade from the add-on to the embedded solution. And the upper area, what has been new developed or what's coming new, this is exactly the area of the existing add-on, which Martin is later on covering. I'm now touching those things which are happening underneath here with the 1909 release, and those are my other slides which I present now what's coming now. So this is the first 3 sections are covering what I just have said on the previous slide. The other
topics is just a side remark that we like to know for which purpose that solution is used for. So we have a little survey and asking for the area where you like to implement revenue. This is called this special release restriction, and that is just giving us a taste how that solution should be implemented. And this is a rather quick process. So usually once you answer those questions and if you have sort of passed those quick checks, you get access then to solution itself. Okay, now big news is something what we call optimized contract management. This is basically taking feedback from existing implementations that we have learned that customers or our solution is used really for extreme conditions, like having many POBs in a single revenue accounting contract, so asking for improved performance, or also if you look at the period that postings should not be sort of just synchronized on a period base, but rather on a more granular basis, on a day-based way. And in order to come up for those areas, and maybe I quickly mention another area where we have seen need for a change, that is adopting to the most recent UI technology. And so this is also an area where we said we need to improve, and therefore the idea was to sort of streamline that to new contract management, which we called optimized contract management, as this is covering now those new demands. Yeah. And so don't worry, you can also use the existing contract management in parallel to the optimized contract management. This is by contract type, which you basically can derive by BRF Plus for a specific contract, which way you would like to use. And what's coming with that, I will show you in the next slides. We have designed that for really use case that we have extreme conditions, and in the first version coming with 1809 or with that version, we target highly automated revenue recognition processes. That means that the changes which sort of are directed to the revenue accounting contract are rather coming from the sender system and not from the contract management itself. So in that sense, they are highly automated. Yeah. And change processes itself would be rather supported from the operational system and not so much from the UI based. And I will give you also insights about the new UI, which is now directed to our Fiori approach. And all that is also further described in the release information note 2804474. As an example for those additional features, what we have seen is process called termination with a termination expense. So what is that? In the world of allocation, you can encounter a situation where you already recognize more revenue than you can expect to receive money from the customer if he sort of terminates the contract, yeah, before you fulfill the other performance obligations. In that respect, you sort of expect to redirect the already occurred revenues to a different account, which we call here termination expense, and that is a process we now support also with the optimized contract management. Then this is a little flavor now for the new UI, and this is sort of an overview page. I try to show that now directly in the system. So if I get the opportunity, I try to show that directly in the system. And you see here the new UI, which could be a starting page for our customer, also leveraging the new possibilities we have in Fiori to sort of combine different kind of applications in a single UI. So you have here an overview page about the recognized revenue. You see here a tile about the status of our revenue accounting contract. You see here sort of details about the fulfillment type and the corresponding amount. And you could also select the top customers either by recognized revenue or by contractual price.
So, Carol, is this available now in 1909, or is this an example of what's coming?
This is, from my knowledge, available now with 1909. Yes.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Mm-hmm. Welcome. So you could either then navigate from the Fiori Launchpad to the different areas. If you are interested, you could also use the quick links. And for example, if you like to have a view at a specific revenue contract, you could navigate now, looking to maybe a specific revenue accounting contract. And this is a kind of a selection, and you see here that this contract is now having two performance obligations which are built up. So you have one a smartphone and one subscription, and you can also look at the revenue schedule. And the revenue schedule, this is now rather technical, but this is also right away now re-implemented on the HANA in order to speed up also with sort of the performance. And so this is now having a very quick access to our revenue schedule here. Now, all the things you know, like display change history, you also have available. I would like to now conclude with a quick highlight from our development, and this is the analytics area. So we have now connected the analytic cloud, and I'll show that on with one example with the disaggregation of revenue. So the disaggregation of revenue now brings us to the analytical cloud, and you can quite easily now define your reports by your own. So you have an area where you simply define the rows or the columns of your report in your design studio, and you start here with an overview page. And once you, for example, like to have a view on the performance obligation type, you can just sort of put that criteria in your rows, and you see here now I had the performance obligation itself, not the performance obligation, but you can see here now how this is sort of then detailing out about the different performance obligation. You can also remove that again and yeah, put something else in that. Right. With respect to time, I think that sort of is covering our highlights, and I think we will continue now with Martin.
Okay, thank you, Gerald. So that was a quick update. Thanks, Gerald and Volkmar, for driving up this morning from Waldorf on S/4HANA 1909. And now we also will have Martin talk about RAR 1.3. We also thank Martin for driving up this morning. So, Martin?
Okay, now I have to take over.
So, Martin, you need
my
to...
screen.
Make sure your volume's on, too. Your volume?
Just a second.
Thank you.
Okay.
So let's move this over here.
Okay. So actually, I have to say that we are dealing here with the maintenance of the solution, and as I've stated already before in the last user group meeting, we are supposed to deal with stabilizing the solution and make it run, rather than to deploy new innovations. However, if we see there any kind of quick wins, we will look at it and hopefully we can also realize it.
And we talked about some of the reporting enhancements, minor reporting.
Really minor reporting enhancements. So there is no introduction of new analytic strategies like the Furies, etc.
And one clarification for people then is, like the optimized contract management feature that Gerald just described, that is available in S4 1909 only. It's not going to be in RAR 1.3. Right. So that's just one clarification.
Yeah, telling that, you will realize that there is not so much news from the last RAR user group meeting. However, I want to repeat that. In the end, as I've stated already before, the latest support package we delivered was in September, and now the next one will be in December 16th. At the moment, we just had development close for that, so we are on track. So there's nothing which indicates that there will be a delay. So at the moment, it's planned for December 16th as a little Christmas present.
But the feature pack or support pack 10 has already shipped, right?
That's already shipped in September 9th. It had been shipped.
Okay.
So if you are thinking to move to a next support package, you can either go for 10 or wait until end of the year, more or less, for support package 11. So, and that is already told as well, has been already told as well. Here we are now planning to have less frequent deliveries in support packages. So the next support package 12 is currently planned for June next year. So, we have some more time to add some minor features in it. And we can do this because we realized that the bug fixing nodes decreased quite considerably. So this solution becomes more and more stable. And I think it's what I've heard from customers, it's also well received that there are not so many support packages every quarter, so that you can have that, or that you can think of.
It's more manageable.
It's a little bit more manageable, I guess. So if you want to have the details, you can have a look at the certain different nodes where all the nodes are collected, which are new there. As of course, there are still, the majority is bug fixing, but there are also some new features, for example, in the area of analytics. There we want to go this path that we said, okay, we will have pilot nodes. Right now, these nodes are already released. So you can use it without being a pilot customer. So you can try it and see if this is a value for you. And these are the 3 notes where we have some increased transparency in contract modifications, so that you see also the change history in allocation and in the contracts. So the 2 notes, 28544,377 and 2835924. As I've said, the notes are already available, so this is not correct here. It's not a pilot note anymore, so it should be available. At least what I've been told. I didn't check this morning. It happened just end of last week. So the same, yes, and there's another note. We have a reconciliation report for SD, and this reconciliation report had been enhanced so that also non-SAP systems can now be integrated, and specifically also other systems than SD, like FICA, the hybrid billing scenario. And we are still working, and maybe I can show you a little bit in the system of the migrations cockpit. As I've said, this migration seems to be a one-time effort for customers, but we realize that this is really for some customers it's not the case. There are a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and then it becomes more or less a regular action to fulfill or task to fulfill, and that is sometimes very cumbersome. And so we thought to have some sort of you can say guided procedure. What you see here, what I show you, is not really a fancy thing, but it may provide you an idea what we are thinking of. And here we request or we ask for customer feedback to improve that. And this is really the migration, the standard migration we have. Maybe I can just show you in the system if I find it. This is the one. Just a second.
Sorry, could you clarify what kind of migration are you?
So the operational load, the initial load, etc. And maybe I can just show you if I find that. So this is some sort of a report, and at the moment it's really a test environment, and we are just looking at single documents to be migrated, and in the later on it should be also for mass processing. So if you have here, you can select here the sender component. At the moment it's only SD. As I've said, it's just a prototype. SD, that can be also another component. The company code, which is called here SAR. Then we have a sales document. You can select your range, or you can just leave it for free, but then it should run also in the background. At the moment, it's just the foreground, so that you can see what's going on. Distribution channel, sales document created on, and the migration package. And if you carry it out, you will see that it is just a list. You see that we've already checked for VF42 that talking to Vodafone, it's not your scenario. It is rather a scenario where you have SD reference in place and to migrate it from there. And there you have to undergo certain checks, for example, the so-called VF42 check. And if you want to go further, you just have to click here, and then you see the options you have. You can display the data, what is there, and you see the data which should be then created with different try classes. You can go back, or you can then also, as I said, it's not very user-friendly at the moment. We have to change that as well, or enhance that as well. Then we can do the SD load. I will do that, and hopefully and we are just calling the standard programs. But with this cockpit, you know exactly where you are. You don't know, sometimes you don't know, have I done this already, or what needs to be done, and so on. So I will do this operational load. So so you have here also the logs, and there should be now something had changed here. You see that everything worked fine until this step, and now we have to do also you can go maybe here. I can just show you here. If you go to that, oh no, this one not. You can also go back now and do a RAR cleanup and say, it's not working. You can restart everything, and you have everything in place here. Or that's the idea later on. But here, I just want to move on with the RAR processing. As you may see in this, I have opened it up here. Where is it? Just a second. No, it's not yet there. I'm going for the contract search. That's the old traditional RAR. Come on.
Martin, it's just fundamentally exactly the same procedure as used back then for transition, correct? This famous 13-step process.
Transition is a little bit different. It's really migration.
Well, that's the first step of any transition to get the contract in there. The initial load and then the operational load.
Mike, that's an interesting question, because as I'm thinking about our afternoon conversation about migration, I'm thinking that maybe in the beginning we want to frame up what we mean by that. It might be helpful too later.
Yeah, right, because there's two types of migration, right? There's migration of in-flight contracts, and then there's migration, meaning you're moving from one target system like RAR 1.3 to S4 1909, right?
And here we are moving from the legacy system to RAR itself. And you see here at the moment there's nothing in, hopefully, for this contract. And if I do the last step, I have opened up too many sessions here. If I move then to the last step, it's also, there are more than one RAR related. I say all RARs, also the order RAR and the invoice RAR. So I process this here, and then it should be in the end there. So you can move it then to the system, and then you can also do the cleanup again. And the idea is also to enhance this functionality step by step, but we want to do this together with customers. Because here sometimes it's quite difficult to say we should go this path or that path. There we need guidance, and we want to enhance this step by step.
All right,
okay,
so
that's it.
All right. So again, if customers are interested in providing feedback, really being part of the customer engagement initiative for the migration cockpit ideas, please contact myself and Martin Vogt, and we will get it arranged. There is a feedback agreement that needs to be in place, but hopefully we can do that fairly quickly.
Yeah,
so
prerequisite is an FBA, so feedback agreement, and if you're interested, either Pete or me to be contacted.
Yep, perfect. All right, well, we started a little late, so we're going to jump, I think, now to Martin's presentation.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
So this is M&A, right? So
no.
What's this?
M&A? Not really.
I thought you mentioned mergers and acquisitions.
No, it's really...
No, I said because of merger and acquisition.
You could be moving contracts.
Yeah.
from another system.
Yeah.
Core system.
But it's
What about the other way around? Is that also an ask already raised by if you have a divestment? As in, yeah?
not yet.
Okay.
So you are
We need
facing
to have
this.
things on the roadmap.
Yes.
We would have one requirement that means actually to remove one accounting principle from.
Yeah, this is also another story. Yeah, this is I really try to look it up, but we have to go there for FI. These guys take care for that. Yeah. We can talk later.
That'll be a good open topic or discussion topic during networking. All right, we're going to transition. You hear a little noise as we're moving the speaker to be a little closer to.
Okay, so you're one or the other, Yasser.
Or not?
All right.
Excellent.
All right, let's do a sound check, make sure people can hear us.
Yeah, I need to hand over to a couple of people in the room anyway. So.
Right. Testing 1, 2, 3 sound. Can you hear us?
Yes, they can hear.
Okay.
Very good. So, thank you very much for joining us here in gray and rainy Dusseldorf. We'll run through a couple of slides, and I have a few people chipping in here and there to give you a little bit about our the solution that Vodafone has implemented, as well as some of the things that we faced, etc. So I started with the second slide, which basically shows the components that we've used to build our solution. So obviously we have Sap RAR as the core solution, which is we are currently on 1.3 is our system. Together with our SI Accenture, we have gone through. I think it's a 2.5-3 year program to implement RAR and migrate the markets that were relevant for using RAR into the system. We have built a number of manual workarounds, as well as customized some of the solution together with Accenture to make sure it filled our needs, and you can see the numbers on the side. One of the things that we encountered was performance due to volumes that we are using. So I think from a reporting perspective, challenges that we had was running the reports at month-end closure. That we've implemented the materialized views to ensure that we can meet our deadlines there. But additionally, we noticed that the markets that are using it, the tool itself wasn't really fit for purpose for analytics yet. So on top of that, we've built or we mirrored basically the data from RAR into Amazon to give our markets and our data analysts the opportunity to do analytics on that. We've also built some of the basic reports in AWS. Agnes, is there anything you wanted to add to the solution as such?
I think one important thing to know is that Vodafone applied the solution not integrated with SAP. That's quite important because it can be unique across the company. I'm not quite sure how many other companies.
Maybe you want to repeat that?
Okay, yeah. So Agnes was referring to the fact that Vodafone has not integrated it with SD as such. Will be unique to other companies probably as such. You can see online some of the gaps that we have identified initially, which ones have been resolved, or 6 of them have been resolved by SAP, 2 have been closed, and we've basically customized 11 of them with Accenture, and 7 of them are via workaround, etc.
Just so people on the phone know, so when did you start? Because I know you started a while ago. So what version of RAR, I want to say?
I think we started in 2015 with the project, but actually loading data started in 2017, early, etc.
Around an early RAR 1.3, I think, version.
Omar probably knows. Yeah.
And then what? Yeah. Okay, and then what version are you on now?
The 1.3 version. But,
But what support pack level?
I think it's 7 or 8.
6 or 7. Okay. And then how often do you move data into the analytics cloud?
So at the moment it's done daily, and we're even looking to make it more frequent, so that potentially we can use the cloud also with our month-end closing processes. But at the moment the delta is too lengthy, and so it's 24 hours delta between AWS and RAR. So yeah, then it takes too long for the people that work with it on a day-to-day basis to pull the reports, etc.
And Martin, how frequently do you pull in data from your data sources, from the billing systems and so on?
Daily, hourly. So we have a couple of there's some reference in the slide, so on data, but the markets that are using RAR, most of them send on a daily schedule, but it could also depend on the market. Some of them send a bit more dispersed across the month, but certainly the bigger markets send daily files into the system. So it's constantly processing. Anything else that you think is worth mentioning? Okay, so going back to the data flows, I don't know, Heilan, is this something you want to talk through from an architecture perspective? Jonesy, sorry.
Yeah. Right. So what we see there is a high-level architecture of how Vodafone has actually implemented solutions across various local markets. So I'll move from the left to the right. So what we see from the left is we've got the local markets and their local CRM systems. So they extract the data from there into a local repository, a local hub, where in their local hubs the files get converted into a set S15 format file in the form of XMLs. And the XMLs are then carried across through what we call Vodafone uses CFS, which is a corporate file transfer system that transfers the files across into S15 hub, ab initio. So ab initio is an integrated component which we've added on top of the solution. And what it does is it does a lot of the validations of the files from our local market. So it does things around the technical validations as well as the functional validation. The market send the files to us in the form of different events, from inception events to adding events and that. When the data gets into ab initio, all those conversions take place. The checks are done at that level. We do get a lot of feedback between ab initio and our local market. So errors are sent back to the local market, as well as those that successfully get processed are converted to iDocs and into Sap RAR. Once in Sap RAR, all the allocation happens in there, and then finally the files are posted into Simple Finance and then uploaded into Sap Evo. Along each of those processes, there are a lot of reconciliations as well that are done both by the group itself as well as our local markets. So within their own local systems as well, they do a number of reconciliations between their legacy solution and the hub where they transfer they send the files into to make sure that there's accuracy in terms of the events as well as the billing.
Time out here. They're still having a little trouble, I think, on the line hearing. Can you move that any further down? How far can I go?
That's it. That's 1.6.
Cap a little bit more than probably.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So, right. So we have a number of control processes as part of this architecture. So we have our local markets. They will do a reconciliation as well between their legacy systems and the hub where they've uploaded their data into for completeness to make sure that all the billing has also been captured on that. Within Ab initio itself, there is a number of reconciliations again, and like I mentioned, any files that are rejected for any specific reasons, both technical and functional reasons, those files again are communicated back to the local market, so CFS will carry the files back into a staging area where the local market can access the files and look into the errors as well. Within RAR as well, we do the in-flight checks as well. We also generate errors as well, but the errors they are analyzed between ourselves and the local market. Some of the errors are errors that can be fixed centrally by ourselves, by the solution, and some of them will be sent back to the local market if it's an issue relating to the file they've sent. We also have another key reconciliation, which is the BR1 that reconciles the end-to-end billing. To make sure that again from what is come through from the market into the final solution, and alongside the markets also have another reconciliation which is referred to as the BR8. Again, it looks at the billing as well from an end-to-end perspective and between the billing profile of the customer. So each of these checks have been building at various stages of the process, and we have the markets taking care of responsibilities for some of them, and from a central perspective, we look after some of them on a daily basis as well. So in a nutshell, that's on a high level, that's what the architecture looks for us at currently at Vodafone.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm assuming that because you're loading so much data practically daily, that you're undergoing a very significant learning curve here. And is it a fair statement to say that your ultimate goal is that no data with errors should ever reach the engine? So I assume that the reason you're pushing this data back is actually, I would assume that you have two hubs here, right? You have a local hub and you have the corporate hub. In theory, no data with errors should ever be passed to the engine.
Correct.
Right, so in theory, what you're doing here shouldn't happen.
Correct.
So is this true that over time there's a learning going on and you're correcting and building more checks that errors should not come through?
Correct. Yes. Also, over time we have improved in terms of the data quality. So it's two ways. So we've been from our local markets, we've also kind of helped ask them to build in a lot of checks from the outside over time based on the learning curve and the experience, and also with an understanding better of the solution and some of the underlying data architecture and structure of the files. So that has actually improved as well again over time. The ultimate goal is to have as minimal errors getting into the solution. That would be the ideal state, but again we do have certain challenges on a daily basis.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions? We'll go to the next slide. Agnes, do you want to sit here probably on my seat? So.
Okay, so the next slide is basically detailing the so-called gaps that we have mentioned in the very first slide that Martin presented. So I think Vodafone encountered mostly three areas where we were facing difficulties or are still facing difficulties. One of the areas which we had to customize quite heavily is reporting, and amongst this, on top of the performance issues that Martin mentioned, we have issues with disclosure and disaggregation. One of the areas is how to disaggregate the balance sheet into short and long-term positions, also to disaggregate to show the nature of the changes that happen in the contract. And on top of that, we have two disclosure reporting, which are important to mention. One is the revenue that is recognized in the reporting period related to performance obligations that were satisfied in previous periods. So basically, the revenue that should have been recognized earlier. And then the other disclosure report is the unsatisfied performance obligation related revenues.
So one question before you continue. Are you able to just quickly summarize the amount of volume? Because I think you have a pretty high volume, number of contracts, if those contracts are fairly simple or...
I would love to disclose that, but from a commercial standpoint, I'm not going to share contract numbers. We have some data points in here about terabytes, etc.
Okay. Not even roughly? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
It's large, you need to be careful with that kind of stuff. So,
but it's very high volume. So.
Yep.
But I think for these questions, even irrespectively of the volume, we don't have anything in the standard functionality doing the same.
So what
giving us this type of information, just a simpler one, short-term and long-term disaggregation of the balance sheet position.
Okay.
Okay. The next bucket is around contract changes and how Sap RAR is dealing with contract changes. I think this bucket is well known for everyone because also this is one of the areas which SAP is going to solve in the next release with the optimized contract management. So I will skip this part. And then the last one is more or less also something that SAP is focusing around, which are main events that were not covered in the original functionality, like early termination, which also SAP mentioned before in the presentation that they are covering it. In the next release, we have scenarios where we need to freeze the contract for a period of time, for a couple of months, for example, and then we need to restart basically as if nothing would have happened. This is the second scenario, and then the third one is significant financing. So yeah, these are the major areas where we struggled during the implementation, and some of these are still areas where we don't see standard resolution coming up, mainly for the reporting part.
You're in ECC doing this, correct? You're not in S/4HANA doing this. You're in ECC, or are you in S/4HANA? They're in S4?
It's an S4 implementation, but it's not on the 1809 or 1909 release. And obviously, on the add-on release. Right.
Okay.
Any questions on this?
Can I ask you how you handle the short-term and long-term split?
So currently we are handling it via custom reports that we developed.
Okay.
Can I quickly ask you, what is the basis of that custom report? Are you pulling information that resides in your operational systems, or is it based on other inputs or algorithms that you feed?
Purely based on data that we have in RAR. So
in RAR?
Yes.
So a follow-up question from me. In your previous slide, you showed the architecture lends up to very much an automated system where most of the data comes from operational systems through the data hub. How much activity would you say is solely based on changes and inputs in operational documents coming through the data stream versus how much do you actually do of data changes on the actual RAR contract, either within the UI or for custom inputs, right? RAR contract itself can be managed through changes in the POVs, additional POVs. Do you do change on the RAR? Okay. Well.
And how are changes being analyzed? Are they being analyzed in the engine, or do they come from the data hub? Does the data hub determine what type of change is happening? And RAR is merely processing it, or does RAR interpret what's coming in?
Predefined change categories, right? Like, for example, add goods, remove goods, price change, termination, freeze. So these are the predefined changes. How these changes get to the system is defined by the local market. The local market is sending a specific type of change, and then when it gets to SAP RAR obviously translates it to its own language.
And that is not working?
Yeah, that's working.
That's working. That's what I would assume.
What is not working is how you translate, for example, a change in the trend to see what were the changes causing that change in the trend, in the financial trend. But it's possibly also due to performance and data volume that we have.
Yeah. Let me maybe quickly comment on the short and long-term classification. This is Garrett speaking from SAP. The reason why we have not provided a standard functionality so far is that short-term, long-term classification for event-based performance obligation specifically requires a knowledge about future events. And so this is sort of some major sort of activity where we would know how we should get those future events into our system. We have come up with ideas how you could sort of do this short and long-term classification on a project base. We have written a white paper on that, and so just let us know if you like to receive that and share your remarks on that. We are happy to learn on that. Thank you.
And then one comment on the day-based calculation. There is some day-based calculation that was introduced in 1909, right?
Yeah, that's why I skipped that.
And I asked my question just because there will be people on the line who are not using S4, and I don't want them to be confused. So that was only my reason for asking.
Yeah. I just want to raise the attention on this notion a little bit that in determining the short-term versus long-term classification of the balance sheet might require something that we call predictive accounting. Because, for example, to determine when something happens depends on when you will issue an invoice, for example. Right? So in order to do that, the underlying algorithms can get very, very complex. So we need to read information, put it into the right time, and actually, in theory, we'd need to run the engine, because now we're getting into algorithms which are as complex as the engine itself. And only then are you in a position to basically forecast when something happens on your balance sheet, and that's actually the underlying information you need to determine whether it's short-term or long-term. So the complexity is exponential here.
If we go by the book, and we don't know, especially for the event-based DOBs, right, when these will be fulfilled, I fully agree. But we need to go with some simplicity here. So we know exactly, for example, when a contract year ends, and that's predicting that's already something, at least in terms of what is the length, maximum length by when we receive all the cash and all the money.
Because it's very industry specific. So in the case of telcos, usually you have billing plan information, so you know what your predictable revenue is coming in, right? And usually you have also the revenue split out time-based, which is also quite useful. And based on that information, you would probably argue you can produce that information better. You go into other industries which are event-based or where you don't have a billing plan whatsoever, right? There's many events happening. It's actually not possible unless you use some predictive magic.
Yeah. So there are customers which are live on this time-based, and what they are doing is they do a reclassification of the long-term, from the short-term to the long-term liabilities and assets with additional reports. So it's just a posting, and then after a while, of course, this will be reduced from long to short, and this is how they do it. Quite simple. So, but all time-based, yeah. Time-based is like, okay, we can do it. Event-based, difficult.
But is that standard functionality?
That is not standard functionality. These are additional reports they are creating, rather either from an FI point of view to repost or to get the data out of the RAR system for analytics and then post on a lump sum. So they do both, but it's not standard.
You need to write some other.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's what it is.
And if you're interested to get one put into a cookbook where the logic is kind of described, and maybe that can be shared. Right? Thank you.
There's no one's complaining online.
Okay.
There is one question online about volume. Is there anything else you can say on the volume side? So.
Next slide.
Okay. It could be on the next slide.
So,
yeah.
Chris, you wanna?
That's fine. The volume, though, we are not allowed to share contract volume or QBs, but what we want to share is the October statistics.
Okay.
Yeah, so as John has already mentioned, we're receiving from the local market data in XML format. So in October, we have received 105 gigabytes from, I guess, 12 local markets. Ab initio, Ab initio is converting it into the RAR format in .dat format. And here we're talking about just in October, 459 gigabytes has been sent to RAR engine on overall 84 million of events. So this is a daily feed, or daily feed, even more than daily means frequently every hour we get data. Just during month end we stop the processing for sure, but this depends on which load.
And this is all on the HANA database.
This is HANA database, yeah. So our S15 service is running on HANA database, yeah.
And since January 2017, right?
Sorry, I'm on the bottom left side. October statistics.
Right, that's this October. This is from 2017, right?
This is from correct. Top left side is January 2017. Just want to, as a user or customer experience, I want to share some figures here. That since we are live, let's say, with S15 across all the landscape or through the landscape, we have raised 837 OSS messages to SAP, which are supporting us. So since
Martin's been very busy.
Well, Volkmar as well, I get that.
There's only 12 opens left.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So, it doesn't mean that we have 800 open for sure. Right. That means constantly there's an inflow, and we need to fight against the inflow as well here.
What is the inflow now? Is it a lot less than this?
Yeah, I have later on a kind of graph which is showing the OSS, but it's roughly, I would say, 3 to 5 maybe, maximum 5 per week. Per week talking, but 3 I would say is the average probably.
You only report in IFRS. You don't have to do ASC also. You have to do ASC 606 for US reporting.
No. That's why there's Verizon.
I upload it. Some people upload it on it.
So we are running with SAP here a stabilization initiative. So we have one SPOC from SAP and one SPOC from us, which the SPOC from SAP is more or less a management SPOC, where we review daily basis the progress. We get some internal updates already, so not just the updates which are on support page from SAP, which is visible. So it means things which have been escalated within SAP, where internal update is happening already, which is not
incredible amount of data we're moving every month.
Yeah. So this is ongoing. So since June we had roughly 30 open OSS. Now we are talking about 10 to 15, 10 to 12, but this varies, because the inflow is so high. So it could be that we close 8 and get 6 new tickets per week. Yeah. We're coming to the memory capacity chart. Is next slide.
Yes. Yeah.
Or you want? Sorry.
No, I'll pick up that one.
Yeah.
Go for it.
This is based on HANA. Yeah, we could say sizing is wrong. Has been created has been sized wrong, the whole solution. So 1 year ago, we were using 12 terabyte RAM in our HANA machine, and we have noticed and realized directly that this will not be enough. That means we have increased the capacity of memory from 12 to 16 terabytes. But we have one problem here, which is the data size is increasing monthly for sure, and it's not stopping. And unfortunately, archiving might not be an option as we need 2 years data into the system memory. And here we are looking really for internally for a solution currently, what we can do next. So just in June, we have increased again the capacity from 16 terabyte to 24 terabyte, and this is maximum. We can't increase it anymore. And currently, this is the average calculation. That means the peaks within month-end closure are not visible. We are really hitting the maximum, the cap, I would say, doing MEC here. And currently we assume 6 more months, and then we are having 24 terabyte data also in memory.
Which is about when archiving should also start kicking in.
That's what Italians are. But here this will be really a problem. I mean, currently there are some.
There are some fancy boxes that can do 48 terabyte, I guess.
This would be also an option, thinking about new hardware, but not so cheap. But this is just a graph showing how data size is really increasing for Vodafone each month, and does not stop, unfortunately.
That's due in large part to the fact it's cumulative, or are you adding more data, or a combination thereof?
Adding data and not getting rid of existing data.
Well, that's what I mean. You're not adding more data points per se. It's just a cumulative. You're adding more data and not getting rid of all.
Yeah, which should kick in.
So on the archiving point, is the archiving feature there now, or is it coming?
No, it's available.
It's available now.
It's more a business reason
why
archiving is not performed, right?
So the first archiving run for us is planned in what is it? April.
April.
Yeah, maybe it's fair to point out that you're, to my knowledge, the only customer with such a high volume. If we had known this at the beginning, probably we should have suggested some data partitioning efforts, for instance, like company code, which is now a little bit more difficult. Because as you pointed out, there's a certain limit with the HANA box. But to be fair, at the beginning, a long time ago, right, we were not aware that we will hit this volume. We probably all were not clear about this.
And are you having an issue that customers, for example, are renewing and extending their contracts, such that your contracts are becoming evergreen?
But I don't think that's it's one of the scenarios. But I think here, just holistically looking at data growth, because we're not archiving yet. The archiving needs to resolve this problem, and then you will have a more steady flow, right? Because, customers come and go. It would be great if this would continue until the end of time. It would be good for Vodafone, right? If we continue to add contracts and.
I mean, I don't want to talk about numbers at relative scale. So in the beginning, back in 2016, I mean, to what you're doing now, is it a factor of 2 or 3 or 4? Okay.
Yeah. Well, maybe a question that could use for our customers. SAP has some sizing tools available, right? Have you utilized those and find them effective, as in accurate, or right? Because we have customers who are asking the same questions: what should we look at for sizing? And we have the sizing calculator that is released. So.
I mean, I guess Gerald and Wolfgang can answer. I mean, to me, the challenge was, the original set of requirements are now not the original set of requirements anymore, and it keeps getting bigger. So the original sizing is not really relevant anymore. But I guess the question is, in general, how accurate?
How effective is the tool, right? How, plus minus X, right? Customers, how, obviously, same thing. There'll be some reliance on it, but also should they plan for a margin of error that they can...
We always have a margin of safety, right?
Yeah.
To consider. I guess the next question is, what's the margin of safety on the sizing tool?
Right, so there is sort of a margin of safety included in the sizing tool. Of course, it's based on assumptions, and within those assumptions, you could get a pretty good estimate. Now, with your example, we are, of course, in an area which sort of takes individual attention. And we have also the option to then direct to an individual meeting at that point and look for possible options once you're in such an area.
So I think
so this is just a kind of trend about OSS. Question was coming up where we are currently. We can definitely see that during this year the trend is going down. We're talking about sometimes 14 to 20 OSS messages per month. I'm not sure if other customers for sure are raising such amount, if this is less or a big amount, but for a solution which is in place since 2 years for us now, I would say 20 OSS is still high, and we constantly have to work with SAP here. So it's an average since...
I think the trend is positive though.
Yeah, but why do you still have them? Is it because you're doing new things? I mean, I know in your business there's constantly new offers, new products, new bundles, and is that the challenge that you're constantly doing new things?
No, I don't think it's constantly new things. I think it's just the amount of data volume allows for so many different outcomes that you find new permutations still.
And maybe as to Martin's point earlier, so the amount of new correction nodes that SAP has been producing has been really going down. So one question would be how many of these tickets at the moment refer to new corrections SAP had to provide or had to be corrected in a way of, okay, maybe the data load was wrong, right? There's some complexity there
I agree.
to maybe stay on the fair side of
So this is just pulling everything that we've raised. They may have been closed with not being the SAP problem, etc. I think that's fair to say. I think one of the things that I found interesting, and that's where the traditional service management, incident management challenge, where you have multiple parties, it's and I call it the throwing over the fence, right? So sit and wait till a ticket comes in. Okay, I analyze it. Oh, I need to go back because I need X or Y, and then another party picks it up. I think that's where a lot of time is lost, etc. Especially specifically in a financial system where you're fighting against the month-end closure sometimes. We could do with a bit quicker resolution time on that. That's not to say that the developers are not quick in finding a resolution, but I think if you look at the overall journey, raising a note until it's closed, and how many chains it has to go through, it can take a while.
Talking about the node which has been released, or talking about the FIRA component, the trend was going down, so it was, I would say, roughly 40 per month, usually, I would say, nodes which has been released by SAP.
To you?
No, in general, each month, and then since June, it was going down, and here we had several discussions if this is related to the summer break, more or less, And just October received the number 65 last month. 65 nodes has been released. It's
but it's a seasonality.
Yeah, so it might be just, not saying that the nodes are going down. It might be just during a summertime now. It was maybe no issue. We need to review still, but there's still a lot of bug fixes happening in the background.
But you have to check whether these nodes...
Go back one slide.
Oh, sorry.
Well, he's after you. I have a question, but go ahead, Martin.
These nodes, you're just counting the nodes, or you are looking at the nodes if these are really bug fixing?
Here we're just talking about OSS messages which we have raised.
And if you look at the nodes, you also have to look at. We had some increase now for certain customers, thinking of correction reports, which is not always caused by SAP itself.
Which was not counted. No. So you pull from a list of nodes, but the question is, did you pull corrections versus advanced development? did you separate them? But that would be, so I don't have the statistics.
So we are getting such report, not this, just talking about the notes which we are referring to. Here we're getting the reports from Tony Frisbelt or Barbara.
Yeah.
So
And there's some of those advanced developments of Martin.
Yeah, I think both Warren and Mara's point is that there could be 65 notes released a month, but some of those notes are not bug fixes. Some of them are enhancements.
Yeah, but you're.
So advanced development
I will check it anyway.
Into our sheet. I just got the Excel list to open. But
it's interesting to see what the
trend is.
Yeah.
The question you said more than 350 connection opening requests. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is in case we rate the OSS and just the support just based on writing is not sufficient enough. They would like to connect to our system. CRR is a problem in detail. Then we're opening the connection, to the system, and that means since January 350
so roughly
connections we have
almost half, a little less than half.
Correct.
45% or something requires someone from SAP to look at your system.
Correct. Kind of advanced detail review.
Looking at the characteristics or that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Also means that some of the situations we're looking at are probably more complex than put into paper, right? So we are certainly hitting now a level of complexity which requires, apart from your excellent on-site team, to look maybe also from SAP support into it. There's nothing you can handle on paper like this note.
Right, and there's customizations involved in
Correct. So a lot of custom codes is implemented in our site, and we also know that this sometimes it's not a good combination with SAP, and that is also then breaking maybe the system, even though SAP is supporting us here, then with correction reports, for example. It's a tricky scenario with system integrator from Accenture. That means during the project, Accenture was building the solution with SAP, and now we took it over, and still we are in touch with Accenture, for example. Even currently, we are discussing, we are receiving support from Accenture as they build the solution for us. That means we are getting support from everywhere.
Right. Let me maybe do another comment on this graph, because I find it very impressive. So how much work has been done. And I mean, this is sort of one of the really major implementations we have seen. So with a very also specific business case and scenario in the very high volume scenario. And I mean, we are able to manage this, And maybe if you look at the graph, you see that you probably can estimate when the go live was, right? Because that was at the highest peak, And so my sort of also my little comment on side remark is that quality, what was also mentioned here in that presentation, is also something you need to take care about the implementation, because we have just heard that sort of for retrieving data from another system, the quality, of course, is key.
Critical.
Yeah, it's critical, And this often is forgotten. And I think if you move some of the testing efforts or data quality measures as early as possible in your process, then you might even look into a smoother curve of that whole OSS processing. So just to also put a different frame to that graph, that especially if you're connecting external systems, please look at the processes, because especially in the very central revenue recognition processes, you always touch very individual processes. Revenue is key for any customer, and if you forward those processes, please take also care that RAR can understand those data.
It's a very good question. Has Vodafone experienced any limitations in terms of the amount of performance obligations per contract that you can have? What are the limitations there? Lines per contract?
Yes, we have. That's why 1809 is being developed, right? To enable what we call large enterprise contracts, where you have a lot of POVs in contracts.
Yeah. That's a very good comment. So many of the gaps you saw earlier in the PowerPoint actually have been a main focus area for the 1909 release, which is contracts with more than 10,000 POVs, the early termination, the day-based contract modification. So a lot of freeze, a lot of these developments actually focused on the requirements we got in and try to, of course, try to avoid all the custom coding, which I think we all agree sometimes also is source of issues. Right?
So the 1909 should take care of most of this.
Yes. So depending on what kind of business you're referring to, but for instance, in the telco space, I would suggest to look into 1909. And if you
because
questions on
1909
that
has
topic, then
the day-based calculation. It has optimized contract management for the deeply nested or large number of POVs on one contract.
And maybe that's also a good point. If you look at the diversity of customers and industries we had to look into, that explains a little bit what the issues were, right? So at one point you have a huge volume of contracts, right? We've also contracts with many POVs and with very specific processes like early termination, frequent contract changes on a monthly basis. And then on the other hand, you have customers with a very low volume of contracts, maybe just in the hundreds, right? With coming from SD and again, a completely different set of requirements. And to look into that explains a little bit why we had to, fight at the beginning, and hopefully are now coming to more options to cater for these different variations.
Your colleague on the phone want to make a comment?
Nope.
Okay. I would like to make one comment here.
Okay, go for it, Shramik.
Yeah, that's uncommon.
Yeah, so 1909 is just, I would say from Vodafone perspective, it is just resolving certain gaps, not all. That some of the gaps are still compliant and still we do not have a standard solution. Just for an example, as Agnes has mentioned about the short-term, long-term, there is another exclusion requirement where we need to give a split of the balance sheet with movement, which is still not covered in the current standard solution, neither it is there in the roadmap as well.
Yep. Thank you, Shramik.
The long short term is, I think, not, because we have the cookbook, and as Gerald explained, if you really want to go into the big picture, which usually we try to do, then it gets very complicated. You need to plug in predictive accounting to have all the planned events. That's not relevant to you, but if we have to look into all the variety of customers, usually that's what we try for, and then we say, well, it's not really achievable. For the other disclosure report, which is the, I don't know which one that is it 116, the famous GAP 15?
GAP 15.
I think that's currently what the teams are looking into. So that's about how to explain the balance sheet movement. Yeah. So what has been addition?
That is one of the most complex,
yes.
I can say, and report or calculation, which currently we are struggling as well to do it, customized way. And over and above that, there are another two gaps. I don't know whether it has been covered or not, but it is also a part of disclosure. I think it's also not part of the roadmap.
Can I comment on one of those? So if you've been following the development of the standard, which goes way back to 2010, 2011, and so on, SAP was one of the companies fighting for simplification, because we knew very, very well that if they write into the standard what they proposed in 2010, then we would be sitting here and we would be talking about very different things. So we were very, very vocal in saying to the boards in London, dear boards, please get rid of the reconciliation. So there was a proposal in there to fully reconcile everything, which means every single movement. So if an invoice comes in, that posts a receivable, then that makes revenue move and the contract asset moves over. This requirement was in there, and we fought very, very hard, and we were successful. The preparers all lined up with Siemens and SAP and everybody there, totally closed, said, we want to get rid of this. On the other side of the table were the investors. They came up with another point. They said, and I want more disclosures. And the board sat in the middle and said, okay, dear investors, are you okay if we get rid of reconciliation? Investor says, yes, if I get my disclosures, the other disclosures, right? So, and over time, somehow many customers still bring back this requirement. There is no requirement to fully reconcile the contract assets, the contract liabilities. And by the way, it's sometimes even theoretically impossible to reconcile them because we have the netting requirement. Sometimes you net off the assets and the liabilities, and if you throw in foreign currencies, you might come to a situation where it's even theoretically not possible to reconcile. So please don't have this expectation that one day SAP brings out a standard solution which totally reconciles everything. It's not in the standard.
And even if it is in the standard, I have the impression that there's different interpretations of what it means. I think we have very diverse requirements around the very same report. And so while it's very specific in the standard, I think what customers expect from these kind of reports may be different.
Yeah. The standard would just say something, give sufficient information to inform your users, financial statements, and then it's up to the preparer and their auditors to fight the battle of what that means. But the full reconciliation is not baked into the standard.
I agree that this level of reconciliation that Vodafone wants is more or less Vodafone specific. They could get away with a higher level of reconciliation. But even if we mention that then the disclosures to require it is fine. But we are even spreading the disclosure reports as I mentioned too.
Yeah, same for the disclosure. So the disclosure package, first of all, is huge, right? And we know exactly these handful of disclosures, which are tremendously complicated. Like this one, the revenue recognized in the period that relates to performance or previous period. If you really think about it, to provide this disclosure, you need to exactly understand which fulfillments triggered which revenue. Then you need to carry that forward, and maybe if you do a change in estimate relating to that contract, which gives the entire contract cumulative catch-up adjustment, you need to peel out that cumulative catch-up adjustment and push it all the way backwards and analyze exactly how many revenues did I have, to which period did they relate to, and then you're going to pull out those that relate to the previous year. And by the way, one big question which actually nobody is really able to answer, what is a period here? We asked this question to the board, to the staff, and we got these fluffy answers. Well, it could be the previous interim report, right? Because we report, everybody reports quarterly, but the official financial statement is always for a year. So then we asked the question, if I'm in Q2 and I have a cum catch adjustment which relates to the Q1 revenue, do I have to disclose that? No answer. Of course, if it relates to the Q4 fulfillment, everybody feels yes, you have to disclose that. So we don't even have fundamental answers to these questions, because that would answer the question, am I thinking in annual bands, and I do need to develop an algorithm which looks at annual periods, or do I look at quarters, or do I look at months? Because actually everybody prepares their books monthly, and then they bake them together into quarterly reports. Then if we ask 10 customers, I promise you we get 15 answers on the simple question, what is the previous period? Is it the previous month, the previous quarter, or the previous year? So these are the struggles we have, and if we bring out one, then one customer will be happy, 14 will come back and complain, I have a different understanding of what the period is.
Okay, so we're going to wrap it there, at least for lunch, right? So on the agenda, if John, you want to go back right to lunch, so we're going to break for lunch, and then we'll come back and have the migration discussion and the portfolio topic. I want to make one clarification on Martin's presentation. He did talk about the enhanced reconciliation capabilities. This is a pilot note still. It's supposed to be released soon.
Yeah, I've just contacted the people, the developers, and they said they haven't found pilot customers yet.
Okay.
So they want to do pilot.
So if you're interested in this note 2023583, please request it through an OSS ticket, and then it will be released as a pilot note. I want
Can't
to
count it over here as far
I want to thank Martin and his team for presenting their implementation. It's very helpful. I also want to, I did not mention Bramsal, thanks again for sponsoring the webinar and the meeting and traveling to Dusseldorf. And Jacek will be here for the discussion after lunch.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to put this session on mute for about 30 minutes, and we'll be back at 12:30 Central European Time, or about 6:30 Eastern Time in the US. Okay, everyone, welcome back to the afternoon session for the user group meeting here at Vodafone. This is user group meeting number 18. So hopefully everyone can hear us. Let us know. The next section is going to be a panel discussion on the migration topic. And what we'll do is I'll just say a few words and then we'll introduce our panelists. And what I'd like the panelists to do after they introduce themselves is just give one or two thoughts about a recommendation for thinking about what customers should do or what challenges they should make sure they're considering and solving when they're going through a migration. Now, with that said, what do we mean by migration? So we had a little discussion about this earlier in the meeting where there is a migration of legacy contracts into RAR, RAR, and that's the first kind of description of migration you see. And that's actually, we have a migration tool for that. That's typically also called in-flight contracts. But typically that's not the migration challenge that customers are most recently asking me about. And so what we're going to ask the panelists to focus on is the migration challenge of moving from a RAR 1.3 instance to a RAR 1909 instance, basically to an S4. We have the optimized contract management, right, that's now available in 1909, so that's a big consideration or possibility. There could also be some legacy data migration involved in that as well. And there, of course, are benefits that we mentioned a little bit earlier about day-based calculations, the optimized contract management, other things. But in general, there's a lot of questions from the user community about, you know, what does it mean to migrate? And I think we'll pose the question now back to the panelists. What does it mean to migrate from RAR 1.3 to S4 1909? And you know, to start, we'd like each of the panelists now to introduce themselves and then maybe point out one or two recommendations for customers in making that transition. So let's start with Mike.
Start with Mr. Mike.
Okay, so Mike Savo is my name. I'm within SAP, within the consulting organization, and I have a team of about 10 experts focusing on RAR and implementing and designing RAR. So on migration, to me, the topic of migration was a huge topic in the transition context. Obviously, many customers were looking into RAR because they are adopting the new standard, IFRS 15 or ASC 606. And back then, there was a transition component, which fundamentally meant that the accounting changed for these contracts. And this transition usually had always two components, a migration and a transition. The migration piece of it was moving the data from a legacy system into a new system, typically RAR. And that means that we are putting the same data into a different system and the numbers should not change, which makes it quite easy to reconcile. So it should be reconcilable because then we have a successful migration. And then as part of that migration, we applied the transition calculations, which means we then started applying the accounting policies of the new standard, and that's where the numbers started to change. So when we talk about migration in that context, we have these two topics going on. But now in the more recent past, where we have two versions of RAR, one in ECC, one in S4HANA, and now latest with 1909, where the functionalities are drifting apart quite significantly because all the innovation is happening in the HANA-based solution. Now we have this additional layer that we might be migrating data from one system to another, but because the system might have very rich and very different functionality, we might get different numbers. So my recommendation is you know, when we throw out just terms like this, migration and transition, add that additional commentary to clarify these terms that everybody understands what we're talking about and what we want to achieve.
Okay, thanks, Mike. We'll go to Hanno now.
Hello, everybody. My name is Hanno Hoffmann. I'm working for a company called Waldorf Consulting. As the name already indicates, it's mainly about SAP because it's also in Waldorf. And since the very early days of RAR from 2014 and beyond, we were deeply engaged with the product on all kind of levels. And I think up to now we have implemented more than 20 RAR projects around the world. Migration was always a topic. Very, very rarely I've seen that a company was able to not migrate because they were able to...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, someone wants to join.
Because they were able to convince the auditors that migration is not necessary. Very rarely. I think you have to have a good relationship with your auditors to do this. But most of the companies had to migrate. And the good news is, for all of these companies, SAP was providing standard reports for migration. So at least there's something. But nevertheless, and this is only part of the puzzle, because for most of the companies, they had to prepare data, they had to create Excels, they had to make themselves aware of how the future of their contracts will look like in order to successfully migrate. So it's not about the technical thing. Matter of fact, I think from a technical point of view, you can execute the migration within seconds from a standard, but it needs to be very properly prepared and thought of because ultimately you're migrating data into a tool which will post into your FI. That means you want to be absolutely sure that whatever ends in your FI is correct because once it's there, it's not so easy to get rid of because FI documents are FI documents, and there's one golden rule inside SAP: if it's posted, it's posted. You can't just delete it unless you really want to have some good discussions with your auditors. So from a process point of view, again, my recommendation is first of all, get knowledge, because there is a lot of knowledge out in the market. You can get cookbooks, you can get help, you can ask SAP Standard Development. They have all kind of informations about migrations, like Martin Vogt just pointed out, the migration guideline. And this covers most of the scenarios that you see in the market, from ECC to S4, from Greenfield, from other systems into S4. And some of this is even covering the new optimized contract management, which will also require some sort of migration or transition, or at least something where you need to move from old to new. Last but not least, I also can heavily recommend a migration service which is available from SAP Standard, which can be purchased on the market via an account executive from SAP, if you're interested. Handing over to the next one.
So, my name is Jacek Dudkowski. I'm part of Brahmasol's consulting organization. We've been working with SAP, with Pete and Mike for also a number of years on the RAR product. What can I add to this? I think at this point, adding to migration, whether you're doing this from legacy and you're already compliant to the new standard from legacy systems to SAP your first time, you're doing a change of platform from ECC to S4. I think the approach to your project is key. You can never underestimate this, never underestimate just the technicality of doing this. Meaning, oh, I know how I'm going to migrate to all my contract types, how it's going to work. I've tested this. I know what I'm doing. Test the volumes. Test the volumes you actually look at. You'll be surprised. You might exactly know how to do contract type A migration, but when you're looking at 15,000 of contract type A, and you realize that everything is now scaling up in terms of timeline, and your finance team is looking at you to finish this up and close the period within committed timelines, you might find yourself in a crunch. It really is a project approach. At Brahmasol, I'm sure others still call it a dry run. Really, more or less a dress rehearsal for your go live. Not just technicalities, again, not just the processes, but the volumes and complexity of the actual data you're going to look at. And I think that will be regardless if you're doing this first time or multiple times, that'll be one thing for project planning that I would advise.
Okay, any follow-up comments? Anyone? Okay, maybe we would dig into a little bit about the optimized contract management, because that's a new feature that's introduced in 1909. And so if I was a customer on RAR 1.3, is there a framework or a set of kind of recommended actions that each of our panelists would make on assessing if it's the right thing to do when moving to 1909, that I implement optimized contract management, or can I live without optimized contract management? I guess I'll go to Mike first and see if any thoughts on the new optimized contract management structure in 1909 and migrating to it.
Yeah, so if you're one of those companies which has the luxury to relatively easily go to 1909 because maybe they're just starting the project right now, or
so like a greenfield?
A greenfield, for example, or if you're on an older ECC release, but you're clearly going to HANA and then you're gonna take the latest and greatest, then it's going to be a pretty simple decision, because with 1909 we are getting significant features which are very important, and we heard them earlier today, but I'll just call them out once again. The entire management of the contract is on a day basis, and all of the customers who have been studying RAR know very well that until now RAR was on a monthly basis. Other than the first and the last month of a period, everything that was in between was really on a monthly basis, and any modification that happened, if it was prospective, was practically backdated to the first day of the month. And that is not really reality, right? If you're more in the consumer space and you have modifications happening on any day of the month, you want those modifications to be accounted on a day basis. So RAR, the 1909 RAR will give you exactly this. The whole calculation is now on a day basis, and with that, very precise. So that's one very strong point to go there. The other one is what we heard about the impairment, contract asset impairment functionality. So if you have any early terminations, want to impair the contract or impair just the POB if that's canceled, you want to have that, because now you can post it against an impairment loss. So these are two features, and you will want to have them. But then comes the but, right? That now comes the fine print. The fine print means that there is no easy path from classical to new contract management for running contracts, because the whole data model changed. So you'll have to very carefully think about adopting this new contract management. Typically, it will be let the old ones bleed out on the old classical ones and bring in your new contracts on the new contract management, and cross your fingers that you don't have modifications in between.
So you would then, your recommendation that it would not be kind of a big bang approach to migration. You would let the old classic ones run out, and you would introduce the new ones.
So there is no one recommendation for everyone. Actually, it starts with a set of questions. The questions are, what contracts do you have? Do you have very long-running contracts? Do you have contracts which are modified all the time? And depending on the answers, it might be a bleed-out type of answer, or it could be a no.
So
that makes no
customers
sense. You have to go for some kind of a.
Could a customer run both in parallel?
Both can run in parallel, but again, this means that if you go backward or upstream in your process, you will have to come up with rules, and here's where we have DRR Plus, but you need clear rules which route these contracts into either the old or the new. And if you think about it, we're practically doubling up our landscape if you now all of a sudden have old contracts or contracts running on the old, contracts running on the new. I mean, RAR in itself is very complex, but now if we just double up and bring in another layer, the company needs to decide whether they're able to manage this level of complexity. But yes, technically, it's possible.
Okay. I don't know.
Well, there's not much to add to that, and I don't.
I have one question here on the recommendation.
Okay.
So when you say that 1909, migration from assuming from 1.3, like, from Vodafone perspective. So as you said that, there is a data model change. So are we expecting the tables will be changed, like party contract, party def item and all this to be changed, or?
I think we're glad to have the opportunity here to Volkmar coming close to the microphone and speaking from standard development point of view.
So a lot of that has been actually pointed out in the release information, so I'm just repeating what's in there. What is the Mike, you referred to a data model change, and obviously there had to be changes. You had to accommodate the database contract modifications. You had to add to the data model. Now, there was a question, is that a huge change? Well, in general, we said we want to keep all the database structures in place. So you have the contracts, you have the POBs, you have the deferral items. But to accommodate these changes, as discussed earlier, for instance, we had to add a field to have the revenue catch-up represented, or to have all the day-based effective date effects, right? There's a new change table, yeah? And this is like what you referred to earlier with the data model changes. Nevertheless, the question is, how significant is that? The attempt was to keep it to a minimum, right? To also make sure that customers currently, and there's quite a lot of customers currently on revenue accounting, to make to enable them with a smooth transition to the new capabilities. Yeah. So maybe that helps a little bit on that matter.
Yeah. So what I understood is, there is no big change in terms of the data model and all, but yeah, obviously we are expecting some additional fields in terms of, covering the database calculation and the new functionalities, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And another point, on the database calculation, as you mentioned, are we saying that, it will change the whole def item table scenario in terms of month-wise recon key, or it will be day-wise, or there is no change on that part?
Well, you have
to. These are expecting, this answer right now is just to have an overview, what we are expecting in terms of volume,
Yes, Martin just said you guys are going to start trying it next week.
Oh, good, then let's wait.
No, just kidding.
So we're not going in. I think one of the concerns is that you have daily reconciliation keys, which multiplies it then by maybe 30, right, per month. So that's not happening. No. But there has been, for instance, an effective date which has been added. Yeah, and there's a new change table. So yes, there are changes in terms of how we store the data, but we're not now multiplying the reconciliation keys. That is a concern.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe a quick add-on. So with the day-based contract modification, we also have this new concept of modification effective date. So now we are able to say that today I receive information which tells me the contract will be modified in 10 days. So the modification effective date is in 10 days in the future. And we can set that up, which means we process the modification, but it really takes effect only in 10 days. But the important point is you need to understand your business, your current business. And if between today and in 10 days, you might be getting 5 additional contract modifications and fulfillment events, you have to understand whether this is the case and in which sequence they come in, because there are some rules here that RAR processes things in a certain sequence. So just, think through it, analyze your situation, and be aware of it. And, ask your accountants whether this is what they want.
I think to maybe add a little more to the point Mike made in terms of looking at your contracts, right? We're talking about features which are very much targeted towards higher volume of changes, larger size of contracts, which optimize your business. And I know there are clients out there who like to sort of be more hands-on within the RAR UI itself and maybe touch the contract manually. And I think that Mike made the point of know your rules ahead of time and be able to send the data down the right path, whether it's down the optimized contract management path, whether it's more classic up front. It would become a factor. For example, within one type of contracts, you might decide to bifurcate that into multiple types if, for some reason, these things are usually running sort of in the background, nothing changes. some other things are constantly changing and whatnot. So again, if you're moving from an existing RAR implementation to this new, an exercise in requirements analysis becomes a must, right? Not just an IT exercise. Because in my experience, for example, we have clients who really want to just touch the UI. They want to do everything manually. They run the posting jobs manually from the UI, right? They're that hands-on. So we'll see the gamut from people who never really want to see anything in UI unless something went wrong to people who want to do it every day.
Pete, if you don't mind, I'm going to tee up a question that we hear a lot, right? So in the S4HANA space and moving from RAR to S4, we talked about the new features, so thank you guys, that was great. But you get a lot of customers out there. We know customers who are still on 1.2, 1.3 feature pack 2, etc. There's a lot of phases. Do you guys, as a team, have any thoughts or recommendations on, do I move all at once? Do I move in steps? What's the thought process in moving from an older version of RAR into S4?
Especially if it's coupled with an S4 transformation or S4, absolutely. Right? Greenfield, right?
So when you think about that from a greenfield perspective, we get the question of, to frame it, many customers are doing an S4HANA migration and they're reinventing their business processes. So that's A. On the other side of it, they're doing brownfield. They're just saying, you know what? I'm just moving from ECC to S4 and I'm not changing a lot of my business processes. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, so obviously SAP puts a lot of energy and a lot of time and money into developing the solution, improving the solution. So if we compare the 1.2 release to the latest and greatest, either 1.3 support pack 11 or even the 1909 release now in S4HANA, a lot of things have changed. A lot of improvements have come in, a lot of possibilities are there. So certainly a company would want to take benefit of that. But there's this risk if companies take huge leaps, they first need to digest that. So they first need to upgrade, validate that everything's working the way they expect it to work. So don't try to boil the ocean. That would be my advice. Take sizes of steps that you can absorb. Because like Jacek said, with each change of this nature, you will want to do a lot of testing. You want to run your scenarios through the system, get comfortable with the calculations. You want to understand what RAR calculates, which in itself is not easy to understand.
Right. And think about, Hanno, I'll be interested in your and Jasek's ideas also. Think about it from the perspective of, if I'm on an old version where I wasn't doing call-offs or different kinds of issues, you've created workarounds, you've done other things. Can you comment, Hanno and Jacek, on how do you guide customers around that thought process? So
this is Jacek. One of the things that I would recommend is do look into standardizing your functionality if you're going to S4. Let's say your customer who is on an earlier release and your roadmap to an S4 base on a release, and you've implemented, to John's point, call-off order solution, which wasn't available in some of the earlier releases. You probably would want to look at that and perhaps maybe bring it to standard, because then your data set is aligned between what you're coming from ECC RAR to what you're coming onto S4, right? In previous call-off, an example, folks would be looking at call-offs by manipulating the header ID of the documents coming in to put together a call-off order with a header contract, right? That was resolved by SAP as a standard solution. We had clients who, when they were doing an upgrade, needed to do some jumping through hoops to take their custom code into a standard solution. To Mike's point, you don't want to do all of that at once while going also from ECC to an S4-based solution, right? So there might be value in doing a small project that's an upgrade project prior to jumping platforms versus trying to, again, throw too many things into one pot.
Yeah, well, same experience here. Most of our customers constantly ask us for what are we going to do with upgrades, what's the recommendation from a feature pack, service pack, what I'm going to do. So I'm sure you have seen the nice chart from Vodafone with regards to all the nodes which came out. If you are on an older version, sometimes this gets very difficult to apply new nodes, because then you have to apply node after node after node after node, because there are various prerequisites. So all in all, it's a very good idea to upgrade to a decent release.
So just to clarify, that might be something above feature pack 8 or feature pack 9?
Well, at the minimum, I think at the minimum, the recommendation is feature pack 6 minimum that everybody should go. 1.3 feature pack 6, because if you have this in place, your life from a maintenance point of view will be much easier in the future. Obviously, if people are going into S4 and they're coming from old RAR version, that's a different question. But all in all, and I totally agree, it's a little bit of a project. It's not usual that customers say, oh, I'm just upgrading over the weekend and I'm done. It's a little bit of a project, but if it's decently planned and you analyze from the release notes what kind of functionality is coming, what can I replace if I want to replace, and there are certain things, there are possibilities. So a lot of the customers exactly rebuild the call-off option, for example, and now it's available. Same for other SD processes, which are obviously not so really relevant to Vodafone, but for many SD customers, there are SD processes like intercompany or drop shipment or whatever kind of things were not there in the past, they are now there. So, and all in all, it's always a good idea to get more to SAP standard and less to workarounds and customer reports. And that's coming from a consulting company is quite a statement, I guess. So you should stick very close to the standard indeed. And last but not least, with regards to the optimized contract management and knowing the guys from standard development, there will be surely a possibility to move from old to new, either with a guided procedure or with a technical approach, or I guess there will be something coming so that customers are not left alone.
So maybe you can just add to that a little bit, because not everybody may be aware of what this optimized contract management means and where it comes from, right? So the revenue accounting itself has been add-on. This add-on had been developed on ECC stack. Why? Because we said, okay, it needs to be applicable also for customers on older releases, 6 or 5.5 and package 5 of the ECC pack. So and obviously that came with certain limitations. Limitations in a way we had to stick to the NetWeaver platform, the underlying. Yeah, we used WebDynpro, for instance, as a UI. We used data extractors for reporting. We used WebDynpro reports for the consumption. So what happened with 1809 is, and I think this was mentioned briefly earlier, we moved the add-on, the revenue accounting add-on, into the standard S4. And that was more a technical move. Again, no changes. We had to use the same technologies. But with that first technical move, we have now the opportunity to also modernize revenue accounting, and that's what is happening. And when you heard earlier the optimized contract management, that takes reference to all the benefits S4HANA brings. What does that mean? You have a Fiori UI, for instance, instead of a WebDynpro. We constantly now change also the disclosures from data extractors to CDS views. If you're familiar with the S4 speak, consumption would be the design studio. So, and for the optimized contract management, obviously we also pick up of some of the benefits of S4HANA. Yeah, and this is what we mentioned earlier with optimized contract management, and also where maybe some considerations come in. So what's the right one right now for me? Yeah, I mentioned earlier for a telco, probably we've seen many benefits in the optimized contract management, database contract modifications, performance, big contracts, the freeze functionality, the early termination. If you look at it, this is not specific to SD customers. This is very specific to the telco business. Yeah, you don't have a freeze in SD. Never heard about it. Yeah, the customer would not produce, have something like a freeze period in a contract. That's not that common. However, in telcos, it's very common, a common business, you know. And what we will do is we will constantly, of course, now enhance on the S4 stack. We will constantly enhance on the optimized contract management, although it's not yet on par
with what has been available before. And that leads a little bit to now the decision process. What should I do as a customer? Am I more a customer with a low volume of contracts, very heavy SD businesses? I want to update the contracts, with a UI. Some customers do that quite heavily. Then maybe you still with 1909 will have to stick with the classic, we call it classic contract management, versus if you're now, let's say, a big telco customer, it would be really worth considering to go in that direction, because it's also the future. Now back to Hanno's point, what's happening from SAP? Yeah, we heard from Mike earlier, the way it is set up, both can run in parallel. Yeah, you can have your old contracts, let them bleed out, and then with only the new contracts, you can go to the new contract management, the optimized contract management. That has some benefits if you want to pick up the new features. It comes with some constraints. Constraint would be you have to now look into, you could argue, 2 sets of rules maybe, depending on your setup. So one natural, and this is, I'm coming now to Hanno's point, one natural ask to SAP is, can you provide us with a migration tool? And that's what the development teams are currently working on. That's still work in progress. It's not available, but quite confident that with collaborating with customers, right, we can make it soon to have it available. Then customers can also move their old contracts if they think it's applicable. The new contract management, move the old contracts to the optimized contract management. That's more an outlook into the next year with all the disclaimers we usually have to apply. But it's certainly adding more options in how to handle the contracts. Now, if you're a net new customer, as I said before, and you are really in the space of fully automated processing, like in telcos, I would strongly advise to at least look at the optimized contract management if it already fulfills your requirements. Obviously, if you are a live customer already, then it's getting a little bit more complex. So I hope that helps a little bit in kind of decision metrics and also where we're coming from. A history based on we have to also cater and accommodate customers on very old ECC stack, right, with not really the option of S4, picking up S4 features. Now with 1809, starting with 1809 really in the S4 world, and now picking up the S4 features and constantly enhancing them. And that is, as you can imagine, a journey. Right? It's not something which happens from one day to another. Obviously, we are not there with disclosures. We heard it this morning, right? It's understood. We have to work on that. But obviously, you have to start somewhere, and also in terms of roadmap, so the release afterwards also has some plans around further disclosures. Does that make sense, or Pete?
So, how easy it is to roll back from 1909 to say 1809?
Roll back.
So, so if you had already optimized the contract in 1909 and you've done some transactions and postings, and suddenly you wanted to move back to take this contract back.
So from the optimized to the classic one, I'm not sure if really there's a rollback.
I don't think that's possible.
We do track the logs, right? What has happened, but we're currently not planning for rollback functionality.
So maybe it would be useful for folks to, if you think of classic RAR, how a particular document type item category combination is made relevant for RAR, right? And running something in parallel, how is the selection done? For example, I have 3 different types of contracts within my source transactional system SD, right? I want one of those to, because it's a large volume type scenario, to go through optimized contract management. The other 2 I want for classic. How is the selection from a technical perspective done? Is it based on source document characteristics? Is it something else?
So we do determine the classic versus the optimized contract management based on contract category. And that contract category is defined right when the data comes in through BRF+. And there, obviously, you have all the usual standard attributes to determine the contract category, which can be enhanced. At the moment, I think, I would have to lie. Alan, do you know, still remember? It's based on the material, right? I would have to look it up, So the contract category is the trigger, classic versus optimized.
the contract category is triggered by VRF Plus, the rules engine. Rules engine has a standard set of rules, right? Plus it can be enhanced. Yeah. So if the source item category, for instance, would be something, I'm sure it's not based on the standard rules, but would need to be enhanced then.
So what that really means is for a particular scenario, so it's defined by particular types of source documents. Let's say the source document type, it usually means that all contracts within that source document type will go down one path, right? Versus an ability for me to maybe cherry pick. I really can't cherry pick when I...
No.
Okay.
No. So it indeed comes with some constraints. Yeah, for instance, if you now decide, okay, they have a contract here with the classic one, and you have an optimized contract here, you can already guess that creates some complexity. This is why we also got some pushback when we raised this initial idea. Pushback like, what happens if I want to combine them now? Yeah. So you have something which is very period-based, which is the classic contract management, and you have the optimized contract management, which is day-based. Well, by the word, right, it's difficult to bring them together. That's why we developed this migration tool, right, which has then the idea to bring everything over to one contract management in the end, which is the optimized one. But we do understand well that not every customer is ready for it. Yeah, for those customers that want to have heavy changes on the contract because there's a revenue spreading and you have maybe, I don't know, allocations which are changed and you do lots of manual contract combinations, then maybe even with 909 you may want to stick to the classic one until we are ready with the optimized one. But obviously the future and the development goes into the optimized contract management.
So new functionality will be part of the optimized contract management.
So when we develop new functionality around the contract management itself, it all goes into the optimized contract management. From the standard development, and we had earlier Martin from our support team, there's obviously minor things which are enhanced based on customer feedback, but the heavy development rather goes into the contract management. Now, that simplifies a little bit the architecture picture. So obviously, optimized contract management deals with contract management, and there's then an inbound processing, and then there's disclosures, and then there's also the area of the posting management, right? So when you look at disclosures, probably because we work on the same data, some of the disclosures could be also used on the existing contract management. But yes, in general, the new developments go into the new S4 environment.
So, for example, this day-based contract management won't be part of the classical one.
Yes, right. We will not downport this to the add-on as part of ECC. Yeah, it's far too complex. It's not possible. Yeah.
Okay, I guess just final comments, maybe from each of the panelists on, if you were a customer migrating from RAR 1.3 to 1909, what's maybe one or two recommendations you would make if you were in their shoes?
My recommendation would be test. So pull out all your scenarios and run them through. Make sure you understand what the system is doing and can fully reconcile your test cases to the system numbers.
Okay. Oh.
Yes, indeed. Plan a couple of dry runs. It's not to be underestimated, the whole topic. I think for the guys who were involved at the SAP project internally, we did many migrations in order to get it all right. So not to be underestimated.
As tempted as it is to plan a go live around quarter end, because one quarter end, you're going to do reporting on the old standard old thing and go live around there. Believe me, it's easier said than done. You wind yourself to business, the IT team, everybody, bring your sleeping bags into the office. So planning and testing again.
So you would recommend not having the go live on quarter end?
It sounds good, a lot in theory. It's a good date. You end on one principle or one system, whatever. You go live another. it's a lot harder to execute than it seems. So, again, but everybody's different. Everybody has ability to, you can stagger. Migration package functionality allows you to stagger things. There's other things. Obviously, it is dependent on your particular project. But the tendency to maybe jump to that date as a feel-good date is look at it closer.
All right, great. All right, I want to thank Mike, Hanno, and Jacek for commenting, also Volkmar. And that wraps up the migration topic. I'm sure we'll have more of these panels or more deep dive presentations on the migration topic in future user group meetings, because it continues to come up and be top of mind with customers. All right, we're going to take just a minute here while we transition to the next presentation, which will be Mike talking about the portfolio, his thoughts on portfolio and POV. Just give us a minute here. Do you need to unplug? Or do you want to?
Just let me move this.
Okay.
I'm going to need my mouse. I'll tell you why in a second. Let me just plug in. Can I unplug someone?
You can unplug.
As long as you don't unplug me, you can plug
The
me.
last one is me, and I'm good for now for a while.
I know.
You unplug me, it's a short webinar.
That is the power share question, yeah.
Okay, so now I need to share my screen.
First, we need to be made a presenter.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
They can hear.
They can hear? Okay, so let's get going. I have a couple of slides, and then, as mentioned, I have a couple of Excel sheets because I want to show you what's happening inside these portfolios, actually. It's going to be a bit conceptual at the beginning, so bear with me. And then it's going to get pretty practical when I start showing you a couple of numbers and Excel sheets. So the background is this portfolio approach, although in the entire accounting space is nothing new, and I'll show you how old it actually is. And actually, there's no company out there that does not apply a portfolio approach somewhere. But then when the revenue standard came out in 2015, there was actually a hype around portfolios. Actually, it was the telco industry that was pushing this so hard, because back then they said it's impossible for us to manage hundreds of thousands of contracts. So they were pushing very hard for this concept. But if we now fast forward 5 years later and look back, what happened to that big hype? I am aware of actually far less than a handful of companies out of these hundreds of companies that we speak to and who already implemented processes, who have taken the hurdle of applying portfolios. So something happened there. There was a big hype. It turned to nothing, literally nothing. It's not existent out there. And that's why I wanna pick this up for a couple of reasons. Number one, today already we heard about volumes, and what a painful topic that is if you're managing hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of contracts on a contract-by-contract basis. One of them is that it brings the technology to its limits. I mean, we're talking about the latest and greatest HANA boxes, and we are hearing it might or might not handle it. So that raises the question, is this actually the right thing to do, to manage such a huge amount of data on such a base? Or are there other ways to manage the big data? So that's one reason, which is the same reason why it was a hype back then. But the other reason is actually only relatively few companies have implemented end-to-end revenue solutions, even though the new standard is out since a few years. So we still have a pretty decent amount of customers who have this exercise ahead of them. And in order to apply IFRS 15 or ASC 606, they're probably using some kind of a portfolio approach anyhow. It might be an Excel sheet, it might be a workaround, it might be some hybrid. And for these customers, actually, it might be a good time to ask this question, right? Because now we have a lot of experience with contract by contract, even with big volumes. And we have these customers coming in who are already applying some kind of a portfolio approach. So it's a good time to ask, which path do we want to walk down? And what is possible, what's not? Okay, so that's the background. And I'll give you a little more detailed background, a little bit on the literature and the accounting side of it. Then I'll talk about the IFRS 15 practical experience and the hurdle that many companies were unable to take. Then I'll show you an overview of the types of approaches we are aware of. There might be more out there, but these were the ones that I was able to research and dig into and also understand, so there are a couple. And then we'll talk a little bit about managing these portfolios in an integrated ERP landscape. And again, I'll have a scenario at the end, and I'll show you what are the challenges and what we need to be able to handle if we want to handle portfolios. Okay, so is this a new approach? No, it's not. So on the left-hand side, you can see some other areas where portfolios are managed. Leases, right? Many companies are right now implementing the new leases standard. Over there, we typically bundle similar leases. And if I look at all the SAP folks, all these black laptops are managed in a portfolio, right? Because they will have some kind of a 3-year, I think is the average life, and they're just bundled together and depreciated over that period of time. Asset accounting, very old topic. Again, the same depreciation of assets is based on portfolios typically. Then warranty provisions. If you're in a mass business like a car maker, or you're selling washing machines or something like that, the warranties are typically managed in portfolios. And the hottest topic is actually insurance contracts, because the standard setter, so the IASB, is working on IFRS 17 right now. And this was a very, very hot topic in developing the standard. And I came over very interesting things over there, because later you'll see the scrutiny that is being applied to the revenue topic, and many companies actually fail. And what I've learned in looking into the insurance discussions is that the standard setter gave them actually a very broad window when it came to the question of how many contracts over time can be bundled. The IASB said don't bundle more than contracts over 1 year. That gave them like an absolute limit, and then you can of course create shorter contracts. But to me that was a dimension which was, to me, very surprising, because you'll see later we will be discussing things of bundling daily, weekly, but at maximum monthly. So like a totally different dimension. And that's why I think if companies want to walk down this route, they might want to look into this standard to have a reference point if the auditors are pushing back. Hey, I mean, look at that accounting practice over there that apparently applies much broader windows. Okay, so on the right-hand side, we have some sweet spots of the revenue standard, contract acquisition costs.
Just to clarify, I mean, portfolio is an accounting concept that's been applied to many topics for a long time.
Yes, since a long time, and it's a well-known concept, actually. So just to list out real quick the topics that came up now with the revenue standard, or in the context of the revenue standard: the contract acquisition costs, or sales commissions, and I'll talk about this later in more detail. Options that grant a material right, including renewal options, right of return, customer loyalty programs, breakage. So whenever customers not fully utilize what you give them, whether it's customer loyalty point or an option, then you have the breakage topic. And the expected credit losses for contract assets and receivables. So that's technically not in the revenue standard, but it came up in the context of our discussion. Okay, so here, coming back to the revenue standard, this is this famous sentence which basically says you can apply portfolios if the entity reasonably expects that the amounts will not differ materially. And the standard setters are actually very explicit. They even said you don't have to quantitatively prove it out. And despite this, in practice, what happened is actually many companies walk down this path. That's why this guy jumping over that the hurdle, they did not make the hurdle, because auditors were indeed asking for numbers, and they wanted to see the deltas that we're talking about. So that's why I'm going to go into those now in a little more detail about the deltas. So, I mean, the concept is clear. We want to bundle contracts which are sufficiently similar. The contracts that have sufficiently similar characteristics. So that's like one dimension we'll be looking at. The other is the time scale. So even if they are sufficiently similar, how far out can you go collecting these and until you finally bundle them up? Okay, so I'll jump off into the Excel sheet, and this will show, or it will discuss and illustrate very nicely how different or how similar do contracts need to be in order to be able to bundle them. Okay, so this was an idea that was floating around in that 2015 time frame, where when these exercises are done on the map.
Bigger?
A bit bigger?
On the screen here, it looks a little small.
Okay, but then I will see. So this is very interesting because it will show how easy it is and which massive benefit you can get from applying it. So I'll cut it a little bit short. So what we're saying here is I can apply a single factor to an entire portfolio and I will get a result which is very, very, very close to doing the same thing contract by contract. And here's how it goes. So let's assume we are bundling any combination of, and we have two hardware variations and two services variations. So we're selling hardware A and hardware B and service X and service Y in any combination. So we have four different contracts, right? Hardware A with service X is contract 1, A with Y is 2, and so on. So we have four different contracts. And for simplicity, just assume that we're bundling only these four contracts into one portfolio. Now you'll see that I can do them contract by contract, and I will get a certain number. But I can also apply one single factor to the entire group, and then we'll look at the delta. So when we run them contract by contract, we get an allocation factor. So a certain percentage, in this line you can see that for this contract number 1, 63% of the revenue goes to the hardware, and 38% to the service. And it's here in this diagram. So the diagram basically lists out the contracts in this order, so 2, 1, 4, and 3. And you can see that the spread, so always the blue is the percentage that goes to the hardware, the orange, the percentage that goes to the service. And you can see that we have a spread between 51% and 73% when I look at the hardware, which is a 22 percentage point spread, which on the surface appears big, right? If you first look at it, wow, I don't think that I can apply it one single factor and get to the same number. Now let's look at the math. So if I do a contract by contract, this is my allocation. But if I apply a single factor, which is nothing else than taking the smallest and adding the half of the spread, so I put myself just in the middle, then I get these numbers in this line. And surprisingly, so we have a total transaction price of all four contracts of $2,760, and the delta that I get is only $10. So I have $10 too less going to the hardware, and that same $10.81 is too much going to the service. Percentage-wise, it's 0.6%, which already is a very, very small number. And I mean, already here, people feel very confident that I might have a good chance in convincing my auditors that I don't need to manage four contracts individually. I bundle them up, calculate the total of the SSPs, and with one single factor, I get the same number. Okay, so that's that. And now, let's go down here. Oops, that's too much. And let's see what drives this whole behavior. So down here, I have copied exactly the same setup. Everything's the same. And when I was setting this up, even I'm doing RevRec now since way over 10 years. And I started playing with the numbers, and I initially thought that it's actually the transaction price that drives this. So if I throw in contracts which are heavily discounted, or maybe even I charge a premium, then I would get effects on the portfolio. That is not the case. So I'm going to skip this step. I'll just say it verbally. So it plays no role how heavily I discount any of these contracts. It's still the same calculation, still the same factor. But what actually does drive the behavior, and that's what I'm going to illustrate to you, is the SSP spread. So if you know, I have to line it up such that you see the top and the bottom. Yeah, I can't do that. Okay, so these are the original numbers. If you look at the SSP spread between hardware A and B, it was 500 to 800, and the service spread is 300 to 480. I get the same 22%. If now I would decide to throw the portfolio together with different products, so not A and B, but A and X, K, or whatever other product where the SSP spread is smaller, so I'm going to put this to 550. So now I'm only bundling hardware where 500 to 550 is my SSP spread. And same for the service, I'm only going to bundle 300 to 350. Watch what happens to the numbers. Now I brought down the spread to 6 percentage points. So now I only have a variation of 59% to 65%. And if you now look at what that did here, it went down dramatically. It's from, instead of $10.81, it's only $1.49. So this illustrates that the way you put together your portfolio, and again, here what drives it is the spread of the SSP, you have dramatic effects on the so-called error. Okay, and this is exactly the type of discussion that you need to have with your auditors to get over this hurdle. But the benefit is amazing. These are 4 contracts. Of course, I could have put in 500,000 contracts of type A and 200,000 of type B and so on. I could have huge volumes, and I'm doing this operation in one shot. One shot. Okay, that's that. Let's go back. So this is the discussion of how different can they be, and I can still treat them as the same contract in order for the end result to be not materially different. Okay, the other dimension is the time window. So we enter into contracts literally every minute, right? Now I can bundle them once an hour, once a day, once a week, once a month. So how big can this window be for bundling? And now let's assume they're identical for the simplicity. Let's take out this aspect. Now they're identical. So how far out can I go in bundling them? So for this, I have another. Don't look at the bottom yet. Is it big enough for you guys? I know it's a challenge to see everything. Let's still see the whole thing. It's pretty good. Okay, so gotta get this out. Okay, so here the company initially thinks that bundling contracts over a 1 month is okay. So what we have here is the company's entering into contracts throughout the month. So we have 7 contracts here. Right? If you look at these dates, they were entered into in the month of October between the 1st and the 30th, on the 1st, the 5th, the 12th, 17th, and so on. We have these 7 contracts. And these are all 12-month contracts. So up here in this section, I did the exact math, day-based. And again, 1909 day-based calculation, this is what it's going to do for us. So we calculate the exact day-based revenue, and this is what it looks like. So this line here, line 13, shows us the very precise revenue allocation if I do everything contract by contract. And then here in line 15, what I did is I baked everything together, and I assumed this is a single contract which starts on the 15th of the month. It runs to the 14th of at the end. And as you can see, actually in the middle sections, so in other than the first and the last month, my delta is 0. Right? Again, I have the day-based calculation. I am able to calculate day-based revenues, so I don't need to worry at all about the middle. The only places I get errors is the first month and the last month. And just as a magnitude, so here we're talking about €4, which is a 4% compared to that month. So it's only €4. Of course, if I look at, talking about €2,500 as the total contract value. But if in that month I'm generating an error of €4 or 4%, and these two errors actually offset each other. So in the first month it's too little, on the last it's too high. So now if I'm in a discussion with the auditors, I could actually say, I don't care at all, because once I'm in the model, if every single month this happens, so every single month I bundle the same contract, and to the extent I'm not growing strongly or my business is not going down, once I'm in the 12th month, my net effect is 0. And now obviously when we get to the discussion, if I go into a portfolio approach, again, now we're in the migration topic, how do I step into a portfolio approach? Well, obviously we'll have to find a way to avoid this ramp-up problem. So if you solve the ramp-up problem and step into an active portfolio approach, you can show the auditors the delta is 0. I think this is also amazing, right? We can be talking about hundreds of thousands of contracts which we bundle into one single contract, and the error is exactly 0 on the long run. So once I'm in the model. Okay, now the question, like if you're in a webcast, there's always a polling question. So the polling question would be if I create 2 portfolios per month. So every 2 weeks I create a portfolio. What's going to happen to this error? Is it going to go away? Is it going to be smaller? Is it going to be bigger? Who thinks it's going to be smaller? Answer A. Who thinks it's going to be a bigger error?
I'll stick my hand up one thing. Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah. Okay. And everyone else is just going to wait.
Everyone else is.
I think I made the same. You're just splitting it in half. I mean, two amounts both.
Yeah, well, good try. Like multiple choice. Pick one. The answer is it's going to be actually bigger. Okay, now, and this is where, again, a little bit of big data analysis comes in. So what I did here, everything's the same. I've just built 2 portfolios, one for the contracts in the first half of the month, which in theory now, or from a portfolio perspective, start in the first quarter of the contract of the month. And then the second bucket with one contract starting at 3 quarters. I have two portfolios running, and the error tripled. So now I have a €15 error, and now you can discuss why this is happening. I mean, one reason it's happening is because I have a fairly low number of contracts, only 7, and now probably the spread of those contracts from that middle point becomes relatively bigger than just if I take one portfolio where I have offsetting effects, right? But again, this what drives this is the seasonality within the month. So depending on how the customers sign their contracts and whether overall they offset each other, or whether you have front-loaded contracts versus at the end of the month, that's going to drive this kind of behavior. But the acknowledgement here is, big data behaves oftentimes differently than you expect. Like when I did this, I thought, wow, now let's try to cut this down. And I lined up the example, and I went, I tripled the error. Okay, so that's another acknowledgement. Okay, let's move on. So what I have here, I'll go to presentation mode. So these are the 3 types of portfolio approaches we are aware of. And again, it's based on a very, very small sample size, because not many companies have really walked this path. But those who have walked this path, and these are the ones we're aware of. So we have method number 1, which is full portfolio, which means we try to account for all aspects of IFRS 15. So the contract combinations, modifications, allocation, timing, everything. And we do it with the delta adjustment. And I'll show you based on an example what this is. So this is the delta approach, where people say, let the operational systems do their billings, and the billings usually already post revenue. Let's only focus on the delta. and then we try to calculate that delta and post it on top. And then the method in the middle, this is again full portfolio, so we're looking at all aspects of IFRS 15, but we do a full posting, which means if my operational system posts against revenue, the first thing I do, and that's what RAR exactly does, I first reverse that out, then I manage my IFRS 15 numbers, and then I do a full posting of everything that I need. And later I'll show you a comparison between the two. And the one on the right, this is the most common one. So actually, many customers are doing some form of this method where they select only certain aspects of the standard, for example, cost recognition, and for that they build a portfolio and post it. Okay, we'll just move on. Maybe I'll just talk about the downside of the hybrid method, is that because we're treating the different parts of IFRS 15 a different way, we cannot reconcile, and we don't get a margin number. So if we do cost recognition on a portfolio, but revenue on a contract by contract basis, I will never be able to get the real margin together. Again, because of the portfolio effect, because we typically just dump all the costs somewhere, and then we have a dilution of the margin. Okay, and then there's a con, which I'll explain in a moment, of the method number one. This typically can only handle simple challenges. It cannot really go into the complexities of contract modifications and foreign currency contracts and so on. Okay. Now my computer got hung up? No. Okay, I'll show you that example in a moment. So here are the general challenges of managing these portfolios. Contract modifications is a big killer argument. This is something, to my knowledge, until now, nobody has been able to tackle, and we'll get to that, how we plan to tackle that. Also, changes in estimates. So oftentimes, because you're applying estimates already in the initial build of the portfolio, you might have a case where a few months later you have to update those inputs. So you might need to go in and update the inputs and post the cum-catch adjustment into that portfolio. And just generally, the longer the contracts are, the more susceptible they are to changes, and the more you will need some kind of a solution to manage changes. And then you have this risk of evergreen contracts, right? If customers renew and renew and renew and upsell and all that, all of a sudden you might have this endless chain. So you want to find some kind of a balance of contracts that have a start and an end, and then you want to try to build new portfolios. And then also here later in the example, we'll show you how we think that can be solved. Okay, now a bit of the boundaries between method 1 and 2, and for that I'll jump off on my Excel again. There we go. Okay, so now I have a little example here comparing these two methods. So what we have here is a pretty simple scenario. So we're selling hardware and we're selling a service. The hardware is subsidized and the service runs for 6 months. You know, the plain vanilla telco scenario actually. So here in the green section we have all the T accounts. So this is what's supposed to happen. And here, assume that we've bundled 50 contracts together. However, this is illustrating actually the method. Okay, so this is a bundle of 50 contracts, and this is what the model is supposed to look like. So if I first illustrate method 2, which actually is what exactly RAR does, is when here, if it's SD or BRIM or whatever system it is, could be a third-party system. These systems, when they send out an invoice, we get this initial posting of debit receivable, credit revenue. And when this information goes into RAR, the very first thing RAR does is it reverses back, right? So RAR does the so-called correction mode, where it does these two journal entries. So debit recognized revenue, credit receivable adjustment. And from this point on, and I use this terminology, RAR takes full control of everything. Revenue, the balance sheet, disclosures, and everything. And whatever then RAR calculates based on fulfillments and revenue, it's going to go and do this this math here, these adjustment entries, which are oftentimes not easy to understand, but it fundamentally then calculates the deltas and then builds up everything. And just here to show that we ran this not only in Excel, but we ran it in the system and the numbers match. Okay, so this was method 2, where we do the full posting. And method 1 is illustrated over here, where people say, well, my invoice already posts something. I'm only worried about the delta. And in this case, the contract moves into a contract asset position. So people would just calculate the contract asset position and the delta to the revenue, which is the allocation effect. And then they would post something which you see here. So debit contract asset credit revenue. This is the revenue that the subsidized handset in the telco space brings in. And that same amount is then reversed out as revenue that you take away, so to say, from the service billing. So they reduce the whole thing to this very simple series of postings, and they use, or I should say misuse, RAR for these cases. They line up a contract with this transaction price, which is the adjustment, and 2 POVs, and then they just move the revenue from one to the other. And with this, I mean, it's quick and dirty, but it works. Again, with these limitations that you can only do very simple stuff. So this is pretty much all that you can do. You can do allocation adjustments and time adjustments. And that's it. Okay, so that's that. Now here, I'll take another example and illustrate another thing here. This is the right of return example, and it's taken straight from the TRG papers. So if you have a contract for for $50, but you have 100 contracts for $50, and based on your experience, 10% of the customers are expected to return the product. So the discussion back then was, how do I do this? And the initial discussion was, which of the 2 estimation methods am I allowed to use? And is that the same as using the portfolio approach? So the standard setter said, well, no, these are 2 different things. On the one hand side, you can use the portfolio method to analyze your data, but that's not the same as doing the portfolio practical expedient. So what they said is that the standard has 2 methods. One is the expected value method, which goes like, it does the math. It says the transaction price is estimated to be $45 because you take the 50 and say 10% of my customers will return the product. You do the math and that gives you 45. The other method is called the most likely amount method, which says look at every contract and look at the 2 probable data points. In this case, it's either $50 or it's 0, because either they keep the product or they send it back. And then if you use this method, you get a spread of 100% of the transaction price, and you're going to conclude, oh, this method is not really good to estimate that transaction price, you're not going to use it. And then they went on to say, well, what you just did is you used portfolios to estimate the transaction price, but you're not actually doing the portfolio practical expedient. And now I'm going to take it to the next level. If I want to manage this in an integrated ERP system, actually the only way to manage this is with the portfolio practical expedient. Simply because if you look at every contract individually, it's binary. Either the customer keeps the product or they send it back. And if they keep it, they pay you the full price. If they send it back, they pay you 0. And if you look at your logistics system, which does all of this, it sends the stuff out, it issues an invoice. When the stuff comes back, it takes it back into stock, you issue a credit note. These are exactly the 2 data points you get. It's either the full amount or 0. And if you want to get 45 for every contract, in order to make the math make right, you have to go up into a portfolio method. There are 2 more examples, the variable consideration and the options that grant the material right. The mechanics work exactly the same way, and you're stuck with this phenomenon that if you try to do this embedded in your operational system, you're pretty much stuck because it just doesn't work. So you have to elevate into a portfolio approach, and that's what those nice little paintings are doing. So if you look at the top, you have a fully integrated ERP system where every dollar reconciles and everything reconciles to the penny. That does not work over here. You need something like at the bottom where you pull the two apart. And obviously we still want to reconcile, we still want it to be integrated, but we need this ability to somehow put something in between. Okay. So now here's an example. Now it's getting complex because actually we feel that this is a level of complexity which works pretty good with a portfolio approach, and this is why we want to show why 1909 is so important, because if you look at the gray box first, to do this, we need the optimized contract management, we need a database calculation, and we need the contract asset impairment functionality. So the scenario here is, first of all, we're bundling all contracts in a month into a single group. So we're collecting everything and we assume it's one contract. That's why contracts are running from the 15th to the 15th. We bundle 50 contracts here. They start with a subsidized hardware and a 6-month service. And my initial portfolio consists of these 50 contracts with that yellow line over there. And then toward the end, on the 15th of May, out of these 50 customers, 25 of them modify their contract. So we offered an upgrade, which means if you take this new hardware, a trade-in type of offer, if you take the new hardware, you're going to pay an additional transaction price, but you commit to 6 more months of service. And 25 of the customers took up the offer. The other 25 just continued with their existing contracts, so they bleed out. Then these new 25 customers, they practically entered into a new contract because we're managing this in a prospective modification way, which technically is a cancellation of the old, carry over the contract asset balance and move forward. And then in this modified contract, at the end of the 4th month, 7 of the 25 customers early terminated the contract. They just walked away, stopped paying. So we have to impair the contract asset relating to these contracts, and then the remaining 18 bleed out. So that's a scenario. And yeah, I can show you, I mean, I can only verbally talk through it because of 2 reasons. We didn't have the time to fully model it out. Second, our 1909 system had issues in the upgrade. We got stuck. So we went from 1809 to 1909, and we had all these complications, and the basis team forced us back to 1809, and now we have to restart everything and rethink the whole thing. So that's another reason why we didn't do it. But anyhow, we talked through it with my team, and there's only one critical point here where we might need to do a little bit of workaround. Otherwise, everything else we feel works 100% standard. So the whole notion here is we first set up the whole contract. Everything works fine as a single contract. And when this modification comes, we will know that we're talking about 25% of the contract asset balance because 50%, because 50% of the contracts get modified. So we're going to apply exactly that percentage to the contract asset balance, and we're going to partially terminate the POB. That's going to give us this posting that we're looking for, which impairs the contract asset by 50%. And we don't care whether it goes against expense or revenue, because on the other side, we're going to use the very same posting or in the opposite to open up a new portfolio. So the challenge is really this technique of how do I cut off a piece of the portfolio, move it over, and recreate a new portfolio. And again, where we might need a little workaround is this proportional impairment because, standard development. push that feature out a little bit. We were hoping it's coming, but it might come a little later. But anyhow, we'll solve it. So yeah, this is the one challenge. So how do we carve out something, recreate a portfolio which is totally independent, right? So this is the challenge is to create a new portfolio which is independent, then it can start living its life. And then when these customers fully cancel their contracts, and it's practically the same treatment, it's a 1909 impairment posting where we say 7 of 25 is a ratio, we apply that ratio, and with that we impair the contract asset, this time against expense because it's an impairment. With that, those customers are out of the portfolio and the remainder bleeds out. Okay, so stay tuned. Maybe at the next user group, we'll show you this in the system. We just didn't have the time to run it through.
Be in your neck of the woods too.
Yeah. Okay, so that's basically all I had for today.
Maybe it's some additional comments. So how much effort would it be? Well, one, do you think you could practically manage this in the system? And then if so, how much effort?
This is near 100% standard. So this is just configuration, nothing else. The work,
how do you
doing
then,
this in RAR, that's a walk in the park. That's the no-brainer.
How do you manage the portfolio side? Yeah.
Okay, yeah. This is where the whole discussion moves upstream, right? And you guys, you live it on a daily basis. I saw it on your slides. You not have one data hub, you guys have 2 data hubs, right? Apparently you guys have local data hubs which pre-bake the data, and you have another global data hub which again does something.
But are you guys using any portfolio at the moment? You know? Okay.
The question is why? Why not?
Not in revenue accounting.
So from and forgive me if this is a dumb question, but from a system object perspective, you call portfolio, am I still looking at an RAR contract and performance obligations, but it itself is just a combination of data from various sales orders?
Yeah, so
okay.
So in RAR, I have a single contract,
Mm-hmm.
and it's performance obligations, and just like you know it, but in reality, this is a group of X.
So I have a
here it was 50, it could be 500, it could be 500,000. So in my data hub, I collect data and I create a group,
mm-hmm.
and that group is managed as a single contract in RAR.
So if I were to, and again, this is a practicality question. To your example, I do this over a single month as a period,
mm-hmm.
and I have, let's say, contract created every day,
mm-hmm.
right? At the end of the day, I have one contract with 2 performance obligations, one called hardware, one called service, which itself is a combination of 30 hardwares coming in and 30 services coming in. Would I generate that contract on day one and keep updating it, or would I process all that data, wait for it, queue it up, for example, and process it all at once during my month end to create one contract at a time and get its results all for the month end, right?
Good question. The answer to that goes to the controllers of this company, and the question goes, when do you want to see information?
Mm-hmm.
And if they say, I can't wait until month end, I need to know on the 15th what's going on and how much hardware revenue versus how much future service revenue I have. If this second is the answer, yes, you might end up with a case, I can only wait 10 days, and after 10 days I build my first portfolio. And that gives me already the full transparency of future revenues and so on. Even though I'm not going to put this in my financial statements, but I have my first internal set of information. Then I wait 10 more days. And this is the question whether I either create the second set of portfolios, so whether I go into a model where every 10 days I create one and then send them off, or whether when the second comes in, I merge them together and I redo the first, because now I have a new bigger group. The answer to that, lies in whether you're going to get this over through your auditors at all, or whether or maybe the error is so small that you don't care. You might as well just build 3 portfolios every month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there are many solution alternatives to that.
I mean, I don't want to put Vodafone on the spot because we had a series of discussions with the telco industries advisory board in 2014, 15, 16, I think maybe even in 17. Anyway, they discussed at that point. And anyway, we'll come back with, we'll let you guys give us feedback on it offline.
But it's not just a telco thing. It's
Right,
anybody
it's not
that has
just
these
telco,
complex plans. It could be.
Correct. Yeah. Keep
And
in
basically,
mind.
if you have a lot of something that's really similar, right? That's the name of the game is identifying transactions that are very similar. Then those can potentially be considered a portfolio and managed as a single entity.
Yeah. Yeah. So the sweet spot is really to manage volume. So whenever you have contracts which are similar and sufficiently similar that you can merge them into a single group and still get a result which you're able to pass through the auditors. But really if you take a really big step back, what is really the notion here and what is the difference here compared to contract by contract? Well, the difference is the pulling apart, right? It's the pulling apart of the operational system from the accounting system, which can also be a very interesting situation if you have either third-party systems running or you have systems which are just not clean. So the data that you're getting is not clean, it's not structured, and you have to do something with those contracts. So the same principles apply, even if you end up doing contract by contract. At the end of the day, the only difference is what are you actually doing in that data hub? Are you only cleaning data? Like Vodafone is only cleaning data, enhancing data, and then they move it in contract by contract. They could, in addition to cleaning, also bundle, and then they would be sending in less contracts, and maybe they would not struggle then with the 24 terabyte system issue. Yeah. So
I think they're good points. We'll take off. I know that this was brought up before, but there was also some people like the visibility of the contract by contract.
Right, I was going to ask that.
Yeah, I have a question. So did I understand this correctly? So you build your portfolio. Okay, that's easy. You have 10,000 contracts every day in one portfolio. So now you may have changes every day, right? Some add services, some terminate services, some terminate the contract. So, but you still in your proposal reflect every change coming in on these 10,000 items. So this contract is constantly every day on the move, right?
The portfolio amount's moving, but you're only changing the summary, right? I mean, all the insides could change, but really, there's just one entry that would change, which would be the summary entry, right?
Well, let's differentiate between the initial creation of the portfolio.
Yeah.
That's where, and the example I've shown that even though they appear to be different, I am able to put them together, and if I treat them as a single contract, my numbers are still okay. So that's day one.
Yeah.
And now with this example here, no, you don't see it anymore. Doesn't matter. So this one with the 50 contracts and the modification, the carve out. With this, we have illustrated that we are able to dynamically manage these portfolios. It's not a set it up once and let it go, but we can manage and react even downstream to modifications.
Yes,
so
that's exactly the nature of my question. So with one contract that may happen once in a year, I don't know, maybe you have different numbers. But the more contracts you put in, let's say 10,000, you could almost imagine it happens every day. That's every day you change that. 10 services in, 10 more added, 40 package, in, out, whatever, family, in, out.
Sure.
Yeah, so, but just to understand correctly, so in your proposal, you still would suggest that every of these changes is considered, right?
It is considered.
Yeah, okay.
And I mean, you have to also consider that the bigger the group, of course, then the more changes you get, but then the more comparable changes you get. So if we bundled everything over an entire month, we wait one more month, and at the end of the month, we've realized, okay, we have these 50 customers who extend, those 25 who early terminate, and another group who did something else. Again, we wait, collect, we rebundle them, and then again, we treat those as sub-portfolios, and we start carving them out of the portfolio. We just pull them out, and then we manage to change whatever the change is.
Question. So does it work like a contract combination for similar group of contracts in a given period?
No, we're not using RAR's contract combination features at all. No, actually not, because contract combination is always about when I sell to the same customer, like 3 contracts, and I pack them together. Here we're dealing with 50 different customers, and I just squeeze them together.
But theoretically thinking, you're treating it as long contract.
Yeah, and that theoretically it's the same.
There's a summary contract that has to be. In the portfolio page, you're basically adding everything up or averaging, and there's, long story short, eventually there's one contract that represents the portfolio and is managed. Call it a top-side adjustment if we were dealing in a different area, right?
So maybe this is a good point. So where the difference comes between contract combination and building of portfolios, especially now with the database modification. So the way RAR thinks of contract combination, and now that we're in the database, is if I have a contract on Monday with the same customer and another one on Friday, and I decide to combine the two into a single contract, then I have the choice whether I leave the revenue, the 5 days of revenue on the first contract untouched, and then I combine and move forward, so prospective treatment, or whether I say I do it retrospectively. So in theory, I first reverse out the revenue, then I combine, reallocate, then I move forward 5 days of revenue. So these are the type of questions or what RAR would be doing in the contract combination functionalities. Versus what we're saying here is I don't care whether I have 50 contracts on Monday and 80 on Tuesday. If I say I bundle everything together in the middle of the month and I just collect them all together, create one contract, and let them go. Pardon me? Well, if you remember my Excel sheet, I'm going to create some kind of an error on the first month and the same amount of error on the very last month. So it's about errors, which once it's in full swing, they knock off each other. So the error is actually 0.
So if you constantly track of the changes, right? We have seen some other portfolios, right? Mm-hmm. Where actually you apply statistical methods. So basically you set up the initial contract, but you already assume there will be, 5% termination, and there's 10% picking up, and then you try to model this into your portfolio, but then you keep it untouched. Right? So your model is based on, you reflect all the constant changes coming. So you basically know this very single operational contract belongs to that portfolio, right? Yeah. And also if that change comes in from this one, you bring it into this portfolio, split it out into another portfolio. Versus other models, I understood, were based on the idea that you set up your initial portfolio and you have already statistical figures applied, which say, okay, this is what happens most likely over the next 24 months with this portfolio.
Yeah. So I think with that method, where you base your entire accounting on a day one information and historically what you've been observing, that will be very, very challenging to get it through the auditors. Versus this idea here is, yes, on day one, I will be building my portfolio on whatever historic information I have. But I actually stay totally connected to my operational system because I practically absorb anything that comes from the operational system. So contract change, I pick it up, I analyze it, and I will manage it. So I'm really, absorbing every single piece of information versus taking a one-time model and let it bleed out. Because that is very difficult to reconcile. So how are you going to prove out if these are 6-month contracts and you assume they get, some get terminated, some get extended? Now, if you start building up such a model, how are you ever going to reconcile that to what month by month your operational systems are sending you? Like, it's very, very challenging.
You assume that there's an error in your model and you accept it.
Yes, but then the auditor will say, I'm willing to accept it if you show me that that error is not material.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you're in such a world of complexity that you'll end up in a contract by contract to prove it out. Yeah, so no, this is a more real time thinking because it's dynamic.
So you're going to be able to, so I kind of followed it, but you'll come back or we'll have more of a discussion of, it's like the migration piece. There's more discussion to be had and more about the business scenarios and the reasoning why you choose one over another.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, and that's the discussion. What I was trying to illustrate on whether you can bundle something together or not, right? And then how? Because you need to fully understand the accounting that's going to happen for these contracts, and you have to prove it out that you are constantly generating numbers where the delta is less than
X percentage. Which is why in yours you said do sensitivity analysis and modeling to see if it actually will work for you.
Which is the hurdle. This is clearly the hurdle. So here you have upfront this big hurdle with your auditors, whether they're going to say, yes, go ahead and invest, millions and millions in your approach, without then the surprise that when the time comes to sign off on the financial statements, then they say, no, sorry. So this is a path you're walking down with your auditors, but they need to be part of this on day one, because this is an implementation project, and they need to be in this boat from day one. And again, what we've observed is that many companies tried this because it's very appealing, it's a very interesting topic, but they failed.
Yeah, devil's in the details.
Yeah.
Micah, question. It says that you actually collect the contract into maybe a single one, but the performance obligation is still a single performance obligation. You're not collecting performance obligation into maybe one, several similar performance obligations into one?
No, and I know that the literature also talks about bundling performance obligations.
Because
but
you are talking about reducing the, let's say this TB we have used, but if the performance obligation is still performance obligation, it should be similar. There's no reduce of data we need to save.
Yeah. So here I was in a model, and we can have customer can buy 5 things. Then we have 5 performance obligations. I was collecting contracts also with 5 performance obligations, which are sufficiently similar. So if I bake together 200 contracts, in RAR I would set up one contract with 5 performance obligations. Right. At the aggregate amount, times 200.
So I think the way I heard the example is, I am theoretical, I'm Apple, and you can buy iPhone with a 1-year contract, your hardware and your service. It doesn't matter if it's 1,000 different people buy, they're all buying the same phone and same 1-year service. I get one top-level portfolio contract called my iPhone sales with only 2 POBs, a hardware POB and a service POB. They're all same hardware, just 1,000 of them, and they're all the same service, 1 year worth of service, right?
That's $1 million.
And that type of business, it may be easier, but now I'm not sure how often you have changes in telcos, but you have probably on a contract that is very frequent, right? Like I said earlier, you add Spotify package, your family members want to be part of it, don't want to be part of it, you add a new promotion model. So the phone, you buy it, you have the hardware service, you stick to it, right? Versus in telcos, I have the feeling you have a lot of change. Now, if you multiply this into the portfolio, I wonder where you will be in 2 years' time. Yeah, will you be on a single contract because you have so many variations and split out? Yeah, possible.
But then, to maybe take a couple example I said, right? If I'll give you 10% discount if you sign a piece of paper with paper contract, but you'll never modify this for 1 year. And now I just locked X percentage of my customers to this one portfolio, which for me, I know they can't change it because they lock themselves in, right? So I think that's the consideration of the business scenario, how I structure my processes upstream to get consolidation and relatively stable data downstream.
Yeah,
right?
if you have stable data, then that's perfect.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just wondering how easy it would be applied maybe to your model, where at least I had the impression that you have a very frequent level of changes.
We do. We also have some markets where we have the portfolio model applied.
Yes, I think mathematically what happens is you get an initial dramatic reduction, right, because you're bundling everything, and then over time, because you're breaking out parts, you get an increase again.
In the end, in 2 years,
right?
you may be on a single contract.
Well, if you bundle only 20 contracts and then you get 5 modifications, which you'll have to carve out, then you'll probably say that's not worth it. But if you bundle 10,000 contracts and get 20 modifications,
I would recommend pause the conversation, because we've had a lot of discussions on this in the telco advisory area, and that issue came up too, right? And so, anyway, I think it's good.
I think it's good to have a follow-on.
Put it back on.
Question about.
May I also bring in another thought on this? Because we have seen that there are different areas where such portfolios might be applied. And what I find quite interesting that some areas like the contract acquisition cost or customer loyalty programs or right of return, I think those are areas where I think more often such portfolio approaches are applied. And I find that quite interesting because in that area you should also rather think in a kind of contract by contract approach, and you might even come up with different results than applying portfolios. And what is quite interesting from my side is that in those areas it seems to be quite acceptable that you apply portfolios. And so I'm just giving us food for thought, that might be also a quite interesting development and maybe thinking what we see in further implementation or experience.
Well, as always, good food for thought. Right?
Yes. Thanks, Mike.
So stay tuned.
Because we'll be in your neck of the woods for the next meeting. So hopefully you'll be in town.
Yes.
Late January, early February.
Most of you will want to come to our area for February.
We now are into the open topics discussion, I believe.
Yep.
We had to unplug you over here.
Okay.
This is yours, right?
Yeah. But I'm okay. I don't need it. I got time.
Have you been watching the questions online?
I haven't. There weren't any logs for a while, but are there now in chat or questions?
Otherwise, I would have blocked Mike's presentation, so I couldn't.
No, it's
I fell asleep.
Okay, so there is a question.
There is a question?
Yeah, let's we'll cover it in a few minutes. Let's see what open topics people have, so you can plan out the rest of the agenda.
So we're open for open topics.
Are there any
open
topics or items to throw out? Basically, we've covered all the content we want. We have a couple questions that we'll circle back to here in a minute. But since we're all here, are there any open topics?
I have maybe it's a naive question. I'm pretty new, being onboarded on this new project with RAR being implemented. How is the integration with other modules like, not talking about upstream like SAR, but it's a downstream with COPA. So the revenue being recognized or the rules being applied within RAR and then posting to obviously to your deferred revenue accruals and to your P&L. But let's say you want to support your FP&A team by with COPA functionality. So using some user-defined fields which allow them to slice and dice their deferrals and their accruals, the recognized revenue by certain characteristics, whether it's a service period or a customer segment or a product. How is that integration in your experience?
So if the product team wants to try that one, just yeah.
I'm not sure if I phrased the question properly,
Yeah,
but
I think that, I mean, it's about account assignments. Yeah, profitability segment is an account assignment, and we are sort of also using and just forwarding an existing account assignment through the posting. So basically, once you sort of include revenue accounting within the revenue recognition process, we have heard about this reverse posting and then doing the posting again once you're entitled to do revenue recognition, then you're also doing this on the account assignment, including the profitability segment. Of course, there are some specific things about that. If you think about contract asset, contract liability posting, which we do on a contract level by default. If you like to distribute that down to the POB level, then you would need to distribute that also on the POB level, but we have a body on that. There is also one functionality in COPA where you sort of already record and report on incoming sales orders. That is a little differently because we are sort of not yet posting with the incoming sales order only if the contracts have been already created. So that is a little kind of a specific process, but otherwise we are sort of continuing to use the existing account assignment.
So that means if you want to start feeding data further down into code, you can do it via the assignment field upstream.
The profitability segment is already sort of coding the specific characteristics which you like to use. Yeah.
Yes.
So this is done already upfront.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's in the operations.
Forwarded through also revenue accounting and used in posting.
So it's a configuration thing.
Already once you determine the profitability segment in your sender system.
Okay. And we just take it over more or less. And there are the limitations, as I said, if you create new, if you want to create new characteristics in RAR, for example, with linked and leading POBs, then you don't have this information at the moment. Yes. That means, for example, if you have in the operational system, I'm just going away from the telcos, for example, product A, you sell product A, and that's fine for the operation system, for the logistics, etc. But for accounting, you have to account for another POB, warranty, for example, and you want to have a different view on that, then it's currently not possible.
The linked performance obligation is taking currently the account assignments from the leading one. Yeah.
So if you want to distinguish here, I have to say.
The question, if you have that scenario, that comes to the point that there's many variations when it comes to COPA integration. There's account-based, cost-based, and there's these different scenarios, like think POB, honestly, in telco trade, I have not seen that. I'm sure if you want to use that. Yeah. So like, do you want to model a warranty on top of your leading POB, like the hardware? I don't know. I have not seen that. Yeah. But it's difficult now to bring a complex topic to just one sentence. I think you probably would start with, okay, how is your COPA requirements right now? Yeah, and then probably
ask the questions within RAR whether it can handle those requirements that are made in code, or to see whether those requirements are
possible. And that is a dangerous question from your business, because I think there's not one COPA world. Yeah, we had that question before. Does it handle all COPA requirements? That's not a question you can answer with yes, because first you need to understand what level of detail they want to have. For instance, that scenario Martin just gave you came out from a customer. Yeah, and that customer modified revenue accounting so that the linked POB can handle the account assignment in COPA, but that's not really pushed through. What I want to make with that is the whole area of COPA is very, very complex. Yeah, and you cannot just tick the box like it handles COPA. Yes, the standard integration exists, Vodafone, you have COPA in place, and I hope there's not too many complaints about that. SAP uses COPA, but that's account-based. There are many customers that use COPA and are happy. But if you dig into the details, you will find out that there's some specifics of COPA where there are limitations, and probably your business would need to break out what they actually expect from COPA. And then probably you would need to have a look again at it. Yeah. But in general, we have the COPA support and it's documented, and then the level of detail needs to be discussed.
Understood. Thanks. So, Volkmar, questions coming through the chat. So is cost recognition covered in 1909?
Not yet. Your reference is made to the optimized contract management, and we have not covered the cost recognition yet. There's two flavors, obviously. There's the cost of fulfillment, and then there's the acquisition costs. Both are not yet covered in 1909, but they are under development at the moment.
Okay, optimized.
So they're planned to be covered.
Only in the optimized contract management. In the existing or the classic contract management, obviously, they continue to be there.
Right. Okay.
Another question regarding COPA and maybe future development.
Okay.
Regarding quantities that getting reversed. So this is something I've missed in former and existing projects and has been solved by somehow custom development.
That's another good question, yes, because some customers indeed want to also see the quantity in their COPA reporting, right? We don't have that, and currently not in the plan yet. Maybe that's the right concept. But it's just to my point, yeah. So there is no tick the box COPA done. It really goes into the level of what you want to support. The quantities is a valid requirement, but we have not enabled it, and currently also not planned short term.
I would like to understand how.
So the requirement is, so you use COPA for controlling your organization. What we do, what we support with RAR is to control it by the amounts, right? So these are the values, these are the allocation effects, that's the cost. But some customers also want to see that in the quantities reflected. So how does the quantity break out based on the allocation effect, for instance? And that's nothing we do. We just assume something, 10 items were delivered. Yeah, and even though there may be an allocation effect, so the amount may differ, it's still the 10 quantities. Yeah, I think in your case, for Vodafone, I don't see that as being relevant. Yeah.
Okay. Any other open topics? Going once.
Regarding the portfolio. Michael said that this can be done by configuration. Can you share any documents to guide how to do that? Because we think that if you come in any changes, then you need to split out something. That part would be very complex.
So she is saying the management of the portfolio with changes within it gets complex.
Yeah. You probably refer to the carve-out piece, right, where some contracts get that.
Yeah.
So again, because we're not yet there on the roadmap as was planned. We get full impairment right now. That's why my team and I still need to do a little bit of deep dive into partial, because this is practically a partial termination of a performance obligation. Some folks on my team said, "Oh, that works." Okay, I believe these things when I see them, but we haven't gone to that point to work it all the way through to the end. If we make it happen, then I can present it at the next user group.
Yeah, we'll plan an update for the next user group meeting.
Yeah.
February.
Yeah. There were some questions in the chat on that, though, related to is there a way to manage portfolios currently in RAR? And I don't think the portfolios can be managed within RAR at the moment, right? That has to be outside.
Correct. Yeah. In RAR, the notion is we manage a single contract, right, which in reality is a portfolio.
Is a portfolio of something else outside.
Yeah, that's the way we talked about it with it.
And maybe what can be added, I guess there's different opinions out there. What is a portfolio? Like I mentioned earlier, some some customers may say, well, if you apply some statistical figures, that is also a portfolio. I know your opinion is different on that, Mike. And we know that customers have used RAR also to handle these different flavors of a portfolio. Yeah. But very often that was in combination with custom development. So for instance, if you now get these 10,000 inbound record events in, and to bring them up into a portfolio was, for instance, a custom development done. Yeah, so we do not support this out of the box. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, this is this data hub. So usually there must be something there.
Could be the data hub. Could be something.
Yeah, data hub to me is just like a very generic term.
Black box.
Some kind of magic free system, but it needs to be assembled there that it comes in and RAR thinks this is a single contract because it has all the attributes of a single contract.
Okay, there's one other question. Let me see. And we may have to take this to the next meeting, saying, are there life cycle events that we plan to cover in the portfolio approach? Have you thought about that yet? What life cycle events? I think they mean modifications.
Well, yeah, I mean, the scenario that I was showing is one which has a modification and full termination of parts, which appears as a partial termination. So those are some of the life cycle events. Can we cover all of them? Well, we haven't tried yet. You have to go. Right. You have to go through all of them because the notion here is. Here, there's a good example. You had a full termination of some of the contracts, but at the portfolio level, that comes through as a partial termination of the POV. So you need to also apply this transition that something happens to the individual contract. How does it arrive on the surface? Okay. And oftentimes, what you're going to do is you're going to collect all of those which have the same change, and you're going to try to extract them from the portfolio. And that's why I think that's why this use case is a key one, because it answers the questions: am I able to extract the contract out of it and line them up again? And in this case, actually, the carve out itself is neutral, and if I have a mechanism to do that neutral, take it out, then again I'm dealing with homogeneous groups, so it's going to be easier to use RAR.
Okay, another question's come through probably for Volkmar, Gerald, and Martin. The question is, will classic contract management still continue to support compound POBs? Yes? Yes? Okay. That's okay.
Classic, so
classic.
They will be optimized, is not there yet, but that is currently in the works.
Okay.
And again, where have we seen compound? Maybe not in the telco industry, because you're not using compounds, to my understanding. Also, other telco customers have not seen them. If you go to maybe manufacturing customers, even high tech, right? They use compounds. You know, so you sell a subscription and maybe installation service or something. That is a compound, or a project that's a compound.
Okay. No more questions online. Any other topics?
I have one question. You have been mentioning before that you are working on this. Can you elaborate a bit more with what type of systems are you?
Yes, so that is obviously now going into development plan and what the target for 2020. As I outlined earlier, currently, which means the add-on was based on data extractors and Web Central. And moving into S4, there's a completely different world how to deal with analytics. So what we have started to target is basically the disclosures which are also outlined in ISO 15. So the team right now is working on the 116A DMC paragraphs, so the contract balances. And in the next phase, the 118. So maybe one option, and that's that goes a little bit to the point, when you talk about disclosures, that's a wide area, so could be some advanced analytics, you're probably doing, which goes beyond what is maybe only in the standard. What we try to focus on is, first of all, what is based on the standard itself. And if there's an interest, obviously, based on a feedback agreement, we can share with you what the status is as usual.
We also have been working with Volkmar and their team. We have a set of disclosures that we developed back for 1.2 and early 1.3. We've updated them for the FASB and the IFRS format. So we'll be happy to talk to you about what we're doing. I mean, they're essentially designed to say, here's your disaggregation of revenue, your different, there's basically 5 different categories of reports, and we've produced some tools that help aggregate that into the FASB file so you can make all of your notes. But we'll caveat that with everything, which is every customer is different. So it's not here's a set of reports, push a button and poof, it happens. It doesn't work that way. But we'd love to have some input. Yes, actually, we just presented some in our webinar. But I can hook you up. You can just talk to Vivek, and we're going to be talking to these guys and Mike about continuing to evolve them because, they get, in some cases they get you 50, 60, 70%, but it depends on how complex. Right.
So there's a follow-up question on the contract. Use of classic contract management in parallel with optimized contract management. And they're asking if that can be done today or it's planned to be managed, or it may be managed via a body. But basically, how would you enable it?
That's the current status. Current status means we have 1909. So if you have 1909, you basically have the optimized and you have the classic one. You can turn it on. Right, you can, if you have been running classic, you can continue. You have to define a new contract category, and then you can use the new contract based on the new contract category. But effectively, you run then 2 contract management styles, and that, I think, in our discussion, we had some complexity. Some customers are actually asking for, can I only use the optimized? Can I switch to that if you like it, right? And this is where we're currently working on a migration tool, which is not out yet. But it's on the plan.
I love migration.
And which then basically switches everything to the optimized one. So the initial question is, first of all, what optimized contract management offers to you? Is that actually applicable? Again, we're more targeting the automated revenue management. The classic one has many manual features, spreading, allocation changes, but in high volumes, usually you don't need that. So if you still have those processes, then you may also want to stick to classic one. However, if you have a high degree of automation, then you should really look into that starting with 1909. And then obviously we will extend that over time, so next release 2020 then. All the disclaimers.
Okay. Yes, all the disclaimers, I know.
That's the issue you deal with RefReg. You always have to put up the disclaimer.
Yeah.
It would be double bad for you guys who run a RevRec tool.
As you guys are thinking of any last minute topics, let's talk about the next meeting. We'll throw some items out here, right? So the next meeting will be in Silicon Valley.
We'll be in Silicon Valley at Adobe.
Right. We'll have
volunteers.
Some updates on the migration topic. We'll have some updates on the portfolio topic. By then, we'll have a new support pack out, 11, right? Would have shipped in December. And are there any updates planned on the S4 by then? Is there a 2002 plan? No? Okay.
No. So the next release after 1909 is usually the
20. Okay.
Can I ask a hard question? When's the update on cloud? Right. So we have event-based revenue recognition in the cloud. We have our friends from RevSim.
We're gonna post that one for February.
That's what I was gonna say. Is there any updates for February we can talk about?
Sure, whenever you like, have the thing.
I would say February.
February's good.
Very good. Let's give ourselves a few days. Yeah. Okay, so we'll also plan a cloud update for February. Anything else? All right, I think it's a wrap.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
Everyone online, thank you for attending. Thank Martin and his team for co-hosting or hosting us today in person. Bramisol for hosting the webinar as usual. Hano and all the customers from attending, partners and Volkmar and the product team, Gerald, Martin driving down, everyone else that attended. It's been great. Hopefully you'll be able to dial into, that would be your evening, the next meeting.
Yes.
But anyway, we'll record it, right, John?
We always record it.
You want to show that link just so people see it, know where it is? So we now have a better way of organizing the content. We have it inside our Solution Hub. We have an events page now where we put all the content, and then John mirrors it out on the Bramisol site.
Yeah, so give me a moment. I'll send the link to everybody. I'll just show you where it is. So I'm just going to make it easy for myself.
And can you find that link off the homepage, John, or is it?
You will be able to, yes.
Soon. Okay.
We're making some modifications to the website. So.
Okay.
Here is the search for user. SAP. Yep. So you can get all of these on the website.
Yeah, we're starting to backfill some of them.
And then also, I don't know why this is not showing up properly. Probably because. But anyway, so what you can do is there are sections for both the videos. So we upload all of the videos. You can read them, download them, and then all of the PowerPoints are posted, and you can look at those. So if you would be so kind as to send me in PDF your PowerPoint, Mike, your stuff to the extent that you're comfortable with that. And I think the stuff you guys presented is the same as last time, right?
Yeah, there's a little bit.
You just moved a little timeline forward. So. But yeah, there's the.
Just to make sure
send me
that
yet another one.
he isn't as cheeky as he did.
Yeah, I know he's getting cheeky in it. But they're all up there. But I'll send a link to everybody who's got them, and then any of Bramisol's website, the old ebooks and webinars and all of that. We are also going to be, just as a heads up, probably for. We've traditionally done a number of webinars with Volkmar, Gerald, and Martin on the different feature packs. We're going to plan those for first quarter of next year. So we'll have a few more deep dives, and you can actually see some of the system in action. So look for those. And they're also going to be victims of podcasts. So that's more to come with them. And Volkmar's looking at me, you're doing what? Podcasts, yeah. And we're also looking for customers also who can volunteer stories or interest. We're always very interested. I personally am very interested. I know a lot of people have asked, how do you use, everybody uses RAR for the accounting purposes, but how do you use RAR for business decisions? What analytics do you use, and how does RAR help you from a business perspective? We all know kind of what everybody does from I complied with ASC 606 or IFRS 15, but what are you doing from a business? What new and interesting insights has this done? So that'll be something. And then Pete and I are always looking at another option to talk to people about, which is this concept of comply, optimize, transform. So the idea is that you've implemented RAR or any of the other solutions because you wanted to comply with the standards. But it's given you information. It's given you this idea of transactional excellence so that you know that the journal entries that you have and the calculations you have are correct. Now you want to look and say, well, now how do I optimize my performance? How am I looking at my business processes? What am I doing different? And then what's your vision for the future in terms of transformation as Gerald and Volkmar and Martin and the team are looking at analytics in particular. How does analytics change what you want to do? So think about that and think about some questions and ideas you might have around that, because that's something we always talk about, and we'll also be looking for opportunities to maybe get groups like this together at Sapphire for those who want to go to Sapphire. So just a few more quick topics there, Pete.
Yep.
All right. So with that, thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We're going to end.